Welcome, night wanderers, moon dreamers, and brave hearts seeking sleep, or seeking stories that make sleep feel like a cliffhanger. Tonight, we keep our eyes on the North Star and our ears on a certain heartbeat of thunder, because our tale belongs to a God who doesn't always roar the loudest. He simply stands the firmest. Meet Tyr, keeper of Oz, way of the scales, the God who believes that a promise is heavier than a mountain. Stay close. There's courage here you can pocket for the morning, a secret to carry, and yes, a choice that will change everything. You see, the gods have many talents. Odin has wisdom that tastes like ash and lightning. Thor has muscles that could wring a storm cloud dry. Loki has ideas, the sort that arrive with a grin and depart with a fire. But Tyr holds a line. He doesn't sing law, he hammers it. He doesn't bargain with honor, he binds it. And on the day our story begins, he wakes to the familiar music of Asgard. Steel on whetstone, raven wings chopping the dawn, and somewhere far off, the first small howl of a pup. Again, Tyr tells the spear in his hand. His voice is low, patient, the timbre of a judge who never needs to shout to be obeyed. The spear gleams, then rests. Tyr looks out over the training yard, where young warriors stumble toward discipline, like foes learning the word steady. He corrects a stance here, a grip there. Law begins at the wrist. He says, if your hand wavers, your O's will follow. On the wall above the yard, the morning fires flutter. The banners give their usual gossip, whispering of raids and feasts, of Thor's latest cracked mug, of Loki's latest experiment with a cauldron that now refuses to stop boiling. But the gossip bows when Tyr walks beneath it, not out of fear, out of agreement. Even a banner knows when a wind is principled. And then the howl again, higher, nearer, a sound between a yawn and a promise. Tyr turns, and there at the gate stands a boy with hair the color of bark after rain, cradling a bundle of fur that looks like a star compressed into a warm, wriggling shape. The boy clears his throat. Lord Tyr? They said, well, I was told that if anyone can decide, you can. Decide what? Tyr asks. If this is a pup, the boy says, or a prophecy. Tyr lifts the cloth. The eyes beneath are too bright for morning. The pup's teeth are too white for peace. Tyr has seen wolves before. He's seen hunger before. He's even seen luck before. But this is neither hunger nor luck. This is direction. As if the world had thought a thought, and then put fur on it. Who brought him? Tyr asks. Found him. The boy says too quickly. Found. Tyr echoes and lets the word weigh itself. Very well. He holds the pup. The creature's heart rattles like a tiny hammer on a tiny anvil. He will need milk. And a name. The boy swallows. They've started calling him Fenrir. The training yard seems to tilt. A few ravens, eavesdropping as is their custom, hop backward on the wall, as if distance could change meaning. Somewhere, a cloud reconsiders its shape. Tyr does not frown, not yet. A name is not a sentence, he says. It is the first oath we give a thing. Oaths need keepers. He hands the pup back. Feed him, and bring him again tomorrow to me. Now, because you and I are friends, and because a story that flirts with destiny must also flirt with honesty, let me admit that destiny was already standing in the doorway, one paw over the threshold, grinning. Tyr knows it. The ravens know it. Even the boy's shoes, scuffed with running and worry, know it. But knowing is not the same as deciding, and Tyr is very careful about decisions. The day lengthens. Judgment waits for no mead. Tyr sits a bench in the hall of weighing, where disputes are stacked like firewood. A shipwright swears the river cheated him. A farmer insists a frost was tampered with. Loki raises a hand from the back and says he prefers the term persuaded. Tyr hears each argument and speaks not like thunder, but like a door that closes and stays closed. Your word was given. Keep it, he tells the shipwright. Your field was promised the sky, and the sky is famously inconsistent. Accept it, he tells the farmer. Loki sidles up during a pause. Mischief perched like a halo tilted just so. A wolf pup, he murmurs, pretending to examine his fingernails. How tender, how charming, how dramatic. Tyr doesn't look at him. I will not ask who left him at our gate, he says, which is, obviously, a kind of asking. Loki's grin sharpens. and I will not answer, which is obviously a kind of answer. He bows. Just be sure your law is broad enough to collar teeth that can reach the moon. When a thing is young, Tyr replies, you teach it the right path, even if the path fights back. Loki's eyes glitter. And if the path grows fangs? Then we keep our word, Tyr says, as if word were a blade he keeps honed. At dusk, the boy returns with the wolf. The pup has doubled in appetite, in certainty, in opinion. He tugs against the cloth with a little growl that promises large future growls. Tyr kneels. The pup sniffs his palm, then places one small paw on it, an unknowing oath. Tyr nods, almost smiling. Fenrir, he says, you'll learn our laws. The pup sneezes, which is wolf will see. Night paints Asgard blue. The torches angle their flames toward the stars, asking questions no flame can pronounce. Tyr walks the wall alone, as is his habit. Not to escape the noise of the hall, but to hear the older noise beneath it, the creak of a world bending under story. He rests his hand on stone. He thinks of scales that balance when no one believes they can. He thinks of doors that must be shut and bridges that must be kept, and of the single, secret truth that keeps a realm from coming loose. Someone must be willing to promise more than comfort. You hear it too, says a voice beside him. He doesn't startle. Odin enjoys arriving out of the air the way thunder enjoys roofs. The All-Father's single eye as the color of storms reconsidering their manners. I hear a pup, Tyr says. I hear a sentence, Odin replies. The beginning of one. Names aren't sentences. Tyr repeats, softer now. Perhaps, Odin says, and the ravens rearrange themselves to look like agreement. But some names like to pretend. They stand together, two ways of holding a world. Law and knowledge, scale and spear, staring into a night that has more teeth than usual. Will you judge him? Odin asks. I will raise him, Tyr answers. They both know that was not the question asked, and also the answer required. Morning returns, brisk, bright, with the kind of wind that uses your cloak as a flag. Tyr meets the boy by the training yard again. Fenrir is bigger, not a little bigger. Bigger in the way shadows get when truths grow tall. The pup drinks, he plays. He refuses to fetch. He suspects a stick of treachery and refuses to dignify it, because a stick is only a stick until it's a story, and Fenrir will only play with stories. Gentle, Tyr instructs, when the pup jaws at a post, and the post remembers it had other plans. We do not bite what we can bind. We do not break what we can promise. The pup tilts his head. Tyr shows the open palm again, the quiet symbol every good dog and every good law must trust. Fenrir places his paw in it, a second unknowing oath. Days pass, though pass is not quite right. Days arrive, take a seat and watch. Fenrir grows like an idea that won't stop finding evidence. There are rules. No chasing the sun. No chasing the moon. No chasing the messenger who looks like a sandwich. And absolutely no chasing the horse that Loki swears is just a friend. Fenrir breaks some of these rules. Tyr doesn't flinch. He resets the line and makes the law patient enough to be obeyed. If you need a definition of courage, there it is. But word travels faster than patience. In the council, worries multiply like rabbits that have read a motivational scroll. The jaws, says one god. The eyes, says another. The appetite, says a third, and promptly hides a haunch of something under the table to be safe. Tyr listens, because law must listen even to fear. He says, we will guide him until we can trust him, and we will trust him until we must guide him. Odin's eye narrows. Loki plays a coin across his knuckles and turns it into a bird that turns into a rumor. Thor simply shrugs and suggests he could bonk the problem, which is not a legal strategy but does have a certain clarity. That night, Tyr lies awake. The moon does its silver arithmetic across the rafters. He thinks about the boy with bark brown hair, who visits daily because someone must love what the world fears, or the world will forget how. He thinks about the pup, about the way Fenrir will hold a gaze without blinking, not from arrogance but from accuracy, as if measuring whether a promise is made of rope or silk or wind. He rises before dawn, because law keeps the same hours as sorrow. In the yard, Fenrir is already awake, staring at the sky as if waiting for something that hasn't happened yet, and possibly planning to help it happen. Walk, Tyr says, and they do. Past the armory where iron dreams of becoming argument. Past the gardens where Idun once taught apples to vote for immortality. Past the cliff where wind writes its letters to no one. The world is a little too quiet. Listen, Tyr says. There's a rhythm to rightness. Not music, steadiness. When your heart matches it, the jaw obeys. Fenrir listens. The jaw stills. That's the morning the first omen arrives, not in fire, but in ink. A scribe brings a slip of runes to Tyr, palms sweating. He's learned that fate prefers small fonts. From Volva, the scribe whispers. She dreamed. The dream bared its teeth. Tyr reads, the runes are plain, which is to say, merciless. A jaw will test a world. A hand will test a vow. If the hand withdraws, the world will. If the hand stays, the world might. Might. There's a trickster hidden in the word might. Tyr looks at his own hands, both of them solid, skilled, scarred by practice and patience. He closes a note, returns it like a secret he's decided to remember rather than share. You knew, says a voice. Loki again, wearing the expression of someone who has arrived just after the truth did. I suspected. Tyr answers. The others will fear him. Loki says, fear likes to borrow the word justice when it wants better rooms. And you? Tyr asks. Loki smiles, wide, white, complicated. I fear boredom, and endings I forget to be interesting. Then do your part, Tyr says. Make the right thing interesting. Ah, Loki sighs, delighted. You are dangerous. Evening comes with a purple edge. Fenrir sleeps. Finally, an island of fur and breath and the sort of trust that makes even God softer. Tyr watches the rise and fall of the wolf's ribs. He thinks of the weight of scales and the way a finger on the edge betrays everything they stand for. He thinks of hands. Hand that sign, hands that swear, hands that hold, and sometimes hands that stay where they must, even when wisdom begs them not to. Tomorrow, he says to the sleeping wolf, we begin learning chains. Fenrir's ear twitches. It is not an agreement. It is not a refusal. It is something else. The sound threads make when pulled gently through cloth. And you should know, because forewarned is forearmed, and forearmed is sometimes forehanded, that chains will fail. Not once, not twice. 3 times it will fail, and each failure will teach the gods more about the jaw they fear and the oath they need. And somewhere between the second failure and the third, Tyr will wake before dawn, sit at the edge of his bed, and finally ask the one question every keeper of law dreads. What precisely is the price of keeping this promise? For now, the night veils a question. For now, the stars pretend they're only stars. For now, the pup dreams, paws twitching, of a hunt that hasn't yet been invented. Sleep if you can. Tomorrow, the first chain gleams. Morning in Asgard has a way of pretending it is ordinary, even when fate is sharpening its teeth just behind the curtain. The sun lifts, the mead warms, the banners gossip. And today, they gossip louder than usual. Because today, the gods are going to try chains. Fenrir pads into the training yard with the slow confidence of someone who knows his paws are already larger than most helmets. His eyes glimmer. His jaw yawns wider than comfort. The boy who still brings him each dawn stumbles behind, clutching a haunch of meat that used to be proud of itself. Tyr is waiting. His hand, steady, certain, unyielding, rests on the first chain. It gleams bright, forged by dwarves who boasted that nothing of this earth could break it. They named it Ladding, and dwarves never waste names. Simple test. Tyr says, his voice calm. You pull. We watch. The chain holds. The law holds. Fenrir tilts his head. The boy scratches his ear nervously. Loki, lounging at the fence like a rumor dressed in skin, claps once. Oh, this will be entertaining. Chains versus curiosity. My money's on curiosity. Thor arrives, too, hammer slung, already grinning. If it snaps, I'll bonk it. That is not a strategy, Tyr says, without looking. It's always worked, Thor mutters. The God circle. Odin stands at the edge, silent, his one eye storm-dark. His ravens croak, uneasy. The chain is brought forward. Ladding wraps around Fenrir. Link after shining link. The wolf sniffs, licks at the metal, yawns wide. The sound alone unsettles the air. Hold, Tyr commands. Let us see. Fenrir stretches once, twice, then sets his paws and pulls. The sound is like thunder breaking a promise. Ladding snaps, not with struggle, but with insult, as if the chain had been made of song rather than steel. Shards fly, gods stumble back. Loki laughs so hard he nearly falls into his own shadow. First test failed. Tyr says simply, though his jaw tightens. Later, in the hall, the dwarves arrive with another chain. This one is called Dromi, thicker, darker, made for the oars that sulk beneath mountains for centuries. If Ladding failed, they promise. Dromi will not. Fenrir watches them, his tongue lolling in the way only wolves can pretend is innocence. The boy hesitates. Must we try again, he whispers. We must, Tyr answers, because law untested is only wish, and wish is no keeper of worlds. The chain wraps tighter this time, biting into fur. The wolf growls low, patient, as if humoring a game. Tyr kneels, palm open. Remember, law begins at the wrist. Trust me. The paw rests in his hand. A third, unknowing oath. Now pull. Odin commands. Fenrir pulls. The ground cracks. The yard splits. The chain groans, then shrieks, then shatters. Links fly like meteors. The gods scatter. Dromi lies in ruins. Thor raises his hammer. Now I bonk it? No, Tyr says. His voice is steel. Loki leans in, whispering toward Odin. 2 chains down. 1 wolf up. How many more links before the story admits it's a noose? Odin's eye narrows. His silence is heavier than thunder. That night, Tyr walks alone along the wall. The boy follows. Fenrir at his side, now large in the pony, jaw gleaming in moonlight. Is he evil? The boy asks. No, Tyr answers. Not yet, perhaps never. But power unchecked, that is its own law. And law without mercy, the boy presses. Tyr looks at his hand, strong and whole, for now. Law without mercy is only silence. And silence breaks faster than chains. The wolf stops, staring at the moon, eyes burning with something older than youth. Tyr knows, in his marrow, in his scars, in the quiet between breaths, that the third chain must be different. Not thicker, not harder, but cleverer. And he knows, though he does not yet say it, that the third chain will not test a wolf. It will test him. Dwarves, you should know, are allergic to impossibility. Not in the medical sense. In the emotional sense. Tell them something cannot be done, and they will simply ask how much time you'd like to take. So when the gods carried their broken pride down into Svartalfheim, the dwarves only smirked. You need a chain for a wolf that mocks iron? One said, beard tangled with filings, eyes glittering with challenge. Then iron is the wrong language. What then? Thor asked, glaring at the scraps of Ladding and Dromi. Whispers, the dwarf said. Secrets, things that cannot be weighed because they refuse to be. And thus was born the commission of Gleipnir, the chain to bind what no blade could cut and no tooth could tear. 6 impossible ingredients were gathered, each stranger than the last. The sound of a cat's footfall, the beard of a woman, the roots of a mountain, the breath of a fish, the sinews of a bear, the spit of a bird. Loki, of course, volunteered to fetch them, not out of kindness, but out of curiosity, and perhaps because the list sounded like a joke he would have written himself. He returned days later, pockets bulging with what looked like nonsense. Silence folded in the cloth, a glimmer of nothing in a jar, a tangle of threads that felt both heavy and hollow. The dwarves set to work. Sparks filled the cavern. Hammers rang like bells, and the smell of magic hung thick, sharper than iron, sweeter than mead, older than dust. When they were finished, they held up a ribbon, thin, soft. It looked more suited to bind a child's hair than a wolf's jaw, but it glowed faintly, humming with restraint. Gleipnir. This, the dwarves said, will not break. Thor frowned. It looks like laundry. Then let the laundry hold your storm, the dwarves replied, unimpressed. Back in Asgard, the gods debated. Odin's silence loomed. Frigg's worry seeped. Loki hummed, delighted. And Tyr said nothing. Because Tyr knew this would not be a test of wolf versus ribbon. It would be wolf versus promise. They brought Fenrir to the plain. The wolf was larger now, nearly the size of Hall, paws pounding like drums, jaws yawning wide enough to bite the horizon. Mortals whispered his name in fear. Gods watched him with narrowed eyes. This, Loki said cheerfully, is where the fun begins. Fun, Thor muttered, hefting his hammer, isn't the word I'd use. Fenrir eyed the ribbon suspiciously. His nose twitched. That is no ordinary chain, he rumbled, voice deep now, like mountains talking in their sleep. No, Tyr admitted. It is stronger. The wolf bared his teeth. If you mean to buy me, I will not be mocked. Swear it is a test only, and let one of you place a hand in my mouth as token of trust. The gods recoiled. None moved. Not Odin. Not Thor. Not Loki. Only Tyr stepped forward, his gaze steady, his jaw set, his hand whole, strong, open. You want trust. Tyr said, then take mine. The wolf's jaws opened, dark as caves, sharp as winter. Tyr placed his hand inside, a judge placing his verdict where only courage belongs. Fenrir growled. The gods wound Gleipnir round him. The ribbon stretched, hummed, and held. Fenrir strained, twisted, thrashed. The plain shook. The sky cracked. But Gleipnir did not break. The wolf's eyes blazed. You tricked me. Yes, Tyr said quietly. The jaws closed, and Tyr's hand was gone. The sound was not thunder, though the sky split. It was not war, though every god flinched. It was the sound of law being kept and paid for in flesh. Fenrir's jaws snapped shut. Tyr's hand was gone. The wolf howled betrayal, shaking mountains, rattling shrines, sending birds tumbling from the air. Gleipnir stretched, gleamed, and held. For the first time since Dawn first kissed Asgard, the gods cheered. Thor raised his hammer, roaring triumph. Heimdall blew a horn blast of victory. Even Odin allowed a shadow of satisfaction to crease his face. The wolf was bound. But in the center of their triumph stood Tyr, silent, blood dripping from the sleeve where his hand had once been. He did not groan. He did not bow. He only pressed his thumb against his side, jaw set, gaze steady, because law had been served, and law does not whimper. Fenrir strained, eyes blazing. Cowards, tricksters, you made him pay your debt. His growl shook the plain. I will remember. When chains break, I will remember the taste of that hand. Tyr did not answer. Words are for bargains. His silence was verdict. Loki leaned against a rock, clapping slowly, grinned sharp as razors. Magnificent, truly magnificent. A ribbon from nonsense, a wolf in fury, and a god who wagers flesh on honor. The scald will never run out of ink. Thor frowned. He's bleeding. Yes, Loki said, smirking wider. That's the point. Back in Asgard, the hall erupted in feasting. Cups raised, songs sung, mead spilled. They sang of Gleipnir, of victory, of cleverness. But at the high seat, Tyr sat apart. His sleeve tied tight, his hand gone. He drank no mead. He sang no song. His gaze was steady, his silence heavier than all the boasts in the room. Why do you not rejoice? Frigg asked softly. Because the wolf is bound, Tyr said. But trust is broken, and law tastes of blood. Mortals heard the tale soon after. They spoke of Tyr with awe, some with pity, some with pride. Farmers carved his rune into plow handles. Sailors etched it into their oars. Children whispered the god who gave his hand, so the world might hold a breath longer. Tyr himself walked among them, cloak drawn, stump hidden. When asked, he only said, a promise is not a feather. It is a weight, and sometimes it costs. At night, Fenrir's howl shook the stars. Gleipnir stretched, but held. The wolf's voice rang through the 9 worlds, carrying fury, betrayal, prophecy. When the ribbon snaps, I will drown you all in night, and I will begin with the one-handed God. Tyr heard it from the walls. His jaw tightened. He whispered only, "Then I will be ready." The mead of celebration had long since soured. The laughter that filled the golden hall thinned into whispers, and whispers into silence, because triumph is a hungry guest. It eats, it drinks, it sings, and then it leaves you with nothing but dishes. Tyr sat apart, as always, his sleeve bound tight where his hand had once been. He did not raise a cup. He did not join the song. He only listened. To the scrape of chairs, to the creak of beams, to the hushed tones that slid around his name. Some whispered reverence, the God who gave his hand. Some whispered pity, the God who will never hold again. Some whispered fear, the God who proved that oaths can bleed. And Tyr heard them all, but answered none, for silence, too, can be a verdict. Mortals, though mortals understood, word traveled down the roots of Yggdrasil, across rivers, through forests, into the mouths of sailors, farmers, warriors, and children. They carved Tyr's rune into their tools, plows, spears, even doorposts. They swore their oaths upon his name, not Odin's. They told their children, "Keep your promise, even if it costs you. Keep your word, even if it hurts." Shrines rose, simple but fierce, lit with fires that burned steady through the night. And though Tyr did not ask for worship, he visited them. He walked among mortals with cloak drawn and hand hidden, listening to their prayers, weighing their vows. When they faltered, he did not scold. He only said, "Stand again," because law is not thunder. It is persistence. Yet among the gods, envy grew. Though he boasted loudest, sometimes lowered his hammer and muttered, "They carve his rune, not mine." Frigg sighed, seeing mortals look to Tyr for justice more than Odin. And Odin himself, Odin's eye darkened. He said little, but silence has a weight sharper than steel. "Your sacrifice was noble," Odin told him one night, voice low. "But nobility is not leadership." Tyr bowed his head. "I did not lead. I only kept our word." Odin's eye narrowed. And if mortals believe that keeping is higher than ruling, then Asgard itself may tremble. Fenrir's howl carried over the 9 worlds. Gleipnir held, but the wolf's voice slipped through its threads. "You tricked me," he roared. "You bound me with lies. And when chains break, and I will not begin with Thor, nor Odin, nor Loki. I will begin with you." The gods trembled. The mortals prayed louder. But Tyr stood on the walls, his one hand steady on his sword. He looked into the night, into the echo of that vow, and whispered back, "So be it, a promise for a promise." And thus the God of law became also the God of sacrifice, not because he sought glory, not because he loved pain, but because someone had to prove that an oath once given could stand, even if it cost more than flesh. And from that night onward, every child of Midgard who whispered his name before sleep knew 2 things: that promises hold weight, and that wolves, once betrayed, do not forget. Chains may bind a body, but they cannot bind a rumor. And Fenrir's howl had become exactly that, a rumor with teeth. It spread across the 9 worlds like wildfire that had memorized every direction. Farmers in Midgard swore they heard it in their fields at night. Fishermen claimed the waves themselves rose sharper when the wolf called. Children pressed closer to their mothers when the howl rolled through their dreams. And in Asgard, the gods whispered. Some whispered pride. "We bound him." Others whispered dread. "We tricked him." And a few whispered envy. Mortals do not pray to the All-Father tonight. They pray to the one-handed God. Tyr walked among the shrines of Midgard. Fires burned steady at their centers, carved stones glowing with runes of law and promise. Men laid swords at his feet. Women placed bread and mead. Children pressed their palms into the dirt and whispered, "Let me keep my word, Lord Tyr." He did not speak blessings. He was not a god of favor. He spoke reminders. An oath is not a feather. It is a stone. Carry it steady. Mortals loved him for that, because he did not promise to shield them from pain. He promised that pain could be endured without shame. Back in Asgard, envy sharpened. Thor slammed his mug down, froth spilling. They carve his rune, not mine. I break storms, not promises. Frigg's eyes lingered on Odin. Their songs praise his hand more than your spear. And Odin said nothing, but his silence was heavier than thunder. Loki, of course, noticed. "Oh, how delicious," he whispered to the shadows. "The wolf is bound, but the gods are not. Envy is a chain softer than Gleipnir, and yet watch how tightly it holds." One night, as Tyr walked the walls, Odin joined him. Ravens fluttered overhead, restless. The moon was sharp, pale, a coin split in half. "You become their keeper," Odin said. "I am their law," Tyr corrected softly. "Law is not rule," Odin said. "Nor is rule without law anything but tyranny," Tyr answered, meeting his eye. The storm in Odin's gaze deepened. "You think yourself my equal?" "No," Tyr said. "I think myself your scale." They stood in silence, staring at the horizon where Fenrir's howl echoed once more. "This is not finished," Odin murmured. "A chain may hold for a season, but prophecy holds forever." "And prophecy," Tyr said, "is only a promise with better memory." In Gleipnir's threads, the wolf thrashed. His voice carried across the void. "You think yourself righteous, one-handed god? You think sacrifice makes you strong? I will show you strength. I will show you what jaws can do to scales." The chains hummed. Gleipnir quivered, but it did not break. Not yet. Tyr rested his single hand on the hilt of his sword. "Then I will wait, as long as it takes, until promise meets promise." The night fell silent again. But silence, as Tyr knew, is never empty. It is only waiting. Justice is a peculiar guest in the halls of gods. It does not drink. It does not laugh. It does not flatter. It only waits, and demands to be served before the feast. And when the gods bickered, as gods often do, it was Tyr they called, not because they loved him most, not because they feared him most, but because even envy bows, if only briefly, when the scale is set. One day, Thor stormed into the council hall, red-faced, hammer in hand. "He insulted me," he shouted, pointing across the benches. Loki asked innocently, hand on his chest. "I merely suggested that your hammer is compensating for something." The hall laughed. Thor did not judge it. Odin commanded, weary of the noise. All eyes turned to Tyr. He looked at Thor, then at Loki. His single hand rested on the table. His voice, calm as winter stone, cut through the laughter. Truth is not in Loki's words. Truth is in how they wound. If the wound bleeds, bind it. If it does not, endure it. Thor huffed, glaring. Loki smirked. But neither argued, and so the quarrel ended, because Tyr had spoken, and when he spoke, even silence felt complete. Mortals, too, brought their disputes before him. Farmers over fields, sailors over nets, lovers over broken vows. They traveled to shrines where his rune glowed faint, hoping to hear his verdict. And though he spoke rarely, his words carried like iron through water. Keep your word, even if it costs you. Stand again, even if you fall. An oath does not end when it hurts. That is when it begins. And mortals wept, not because his justice was soft, but because it was steady. And steadiness is rarer than mercy. But steadiness makes enemies. Whispers slithered through Asgard. Tyr judges us, some said. Tyr binds us, said others. Tyr holds himself higher than Odin. Loki, of course, fanned the fire. How curious, he told anyone who would listen, that a god with one hand should hold so much power. What will he do when the other is gone? And Odin's silence grew darker still. His eye followed Tyr across the halls, not with trust, not with warmth, but with calculation. That night, Fenrir howled again, his voice sliding through Gleipnir like smoke through cracks. Do you hear them, one-handed god? They whisper your name with fear, with envy, with doubt. They will betray you as you betrayed me. And when I rise, I will give them reason. Tyr stood on the walls, cloak snapping in the cold wind, listening. He did not answer. For once, silence was not a verdict. It was defiance. But deep within, he knew, whispers are chains too, and no dwarf alive had ever forged one strong enough to break them. Chains hum when stretched too long, not always in iron, not always in rope, sometimes in trust. And while Gleipnir still held Fenrir's body, his voice had already slipped free, a whisper here, a rumor there, until Asgard itself felt like a hall with cracks in its walls. It began with the younger gods, the ones whose names skalds seldom sing. They stood at the edges of the feasts, ears open, hearts restless. And when Fenrir's growl rose across the plains, they shivered, not only from fear, but from recognition. Why should Tyr's law bind us all? One muttered. He gave his hand. Yes, but was that sacrifice of the world, or for his own glory? Asked another. Loki smiled in the corner, pouring mead as if it were oil on kindling. Ah, he said sweetly, you've noticed. A god with one hand, weighing all with the other. But what if his scale tips where he wishes? What if his law is only his opinion in armor? The whisper spread. Mortals, though, clung tighter. Shrines to Tyr doubled. Farmers swore by his name before planting seed. Sailors marked his rune on their sails. Children touched their wrists to remind themselves that a hand lost for a promise was worth more than a hand kept for cowardice. Where gods muttered envy, mortals found courage. And Tyr walked the line between them, silent. His presence grew heavier, his shadow longer, his one hand steadier than any council's voice. He did not argue whispers. He did not defend himself. Because justice does not explain itself, it only waits. One night, as the fires in Sessrumnir burned low, Odin spoke at last. His voice was measured, but iron sharp. The wolf's howls twist hearts. His whispers weaken our walls. And your silence, Tyr, gives him room. Speak. Deny his venom. Tyr looked at him calmly. If a word is false, time unmasks it. If a word is true, denial cannot undo it. I will not spend my tongue chasing shadows. The hall shivered. Some admired him more. Others envied him deeper. Odin's eye narrowed. You keep the law too tightly, the Allfather murmured. Even scales can become prisons. And even silence can become consent, Tyr replied. The air cracked. Neither blinked. Beyond Asgard, in the plain where Gleipnir bent to the soil, Fenrir stirred. His laugh was low, rolling, patient. Yes, one-handed god, he growled, his voice carrying on the wind. They envy you. They doubt you. They will break long before I do. When I rise, I will not need to hunt you. They will throw you to me themselves. Gleipnir groaned, but held. For now, Tyr stood on the wall, watching stars shiver above. He did not smile. He did not speak. But deep inside he knew. Sometimes the sharpest jaws are not made of teeth, but of envy sharpened into betrayal. There are two kinds of silence in Asgard. One is a silence after Thor tells a joke, heavy, embarrassed, mercifully brief. The other is a silence of Odin's council chamber, heavy, deliberate, and never brief enough. Today, Tyr stood in the middle of the second kind. The high table gleamed. Ravens shifted on beams above. Gods filled the benches, their voices hushed but sharp, like knives kept just shy of clashing. At the far end, Odin's one eye burned storm-dark. The wolf grows, Odin said at last. Not in body, Gleipnir still holds, but in reach, his whispers turn ears. His howls bend hearts. And I ask you, is this because of the wolf, or because of the hand that feeds a fire? Murmurs swelled. Some eyes turned toward Tyr. Thor slammed a fist on the table. Do not blame him. He gave his hand to bind the beast. Would you rather none of us had the courage? And yet mortals call his name more than yours, Odin said softly. Thor froze, mouth open, then shut. Loki, lounging with his usual grin, broke the tension. Oh, how charming. We've come to that point in the saga where envy dresses itself as strategy. Do go on, I adore this part. Odin ignored him. His gaze stayed on Tyr. You are worshipped as law, as sacrifice, as keeper of oaths. But remember, Tyr, law serves rule, not the other way around. Tyr's voice was steady. Law serves truth. If rule departs from it, then rule is only tyranny in costume. The hall shook with murmurs. Some nodded, some hissed. The divide widened. Odin leaned forward, voice sharp as a spear. You risk tearing Asgard in half. And you risk teaching Asgard that oaths can be bent, Tyr answered. That night, the whispers spread further. Some gods swore Tyr was a true keeper of Asgard, the only one who sacrificed instead of commanded. Others muttered that his justice weighed heavier than Odin's throne, and that was a balance no world could bear. Fenrir, bound in Gleipnir, laughed. His howl rolled like thunder across plains and valleys. They tear themselves apart, one-handed God. All I must do is wait, and when I rise, their envy will have already fed me. Tyr walked alone on the walls, cloak wrapped tight against the wind. He looked at the stars, steady, unchanging, distant. He thought of mortals whispering his name, of gods envying his silence, of Odin's eye-burning storm. His single hand rested on his sword. If envy is sharper than jaws, he murmured, then I will bleed twice, once for law, once for them. The wind answered with Fenrir's growl. There's a kind of silence that even songs refuse to touch. The silence after a verdict is spoken, when all know the weight has fallen, and nothing can lift it again. That was the silence in Gladsheim when Odin rose from the high seat, his cloak heavy as storm clouds. He said nothing to Tyr. He only looked at him, one eye, deep as a well no rope can measure, and left the chamber. The benches shook with whispers. The ravens stirred, restless. And Tyr understood. Sometimes words are threats, but Odin's silence was war. That night the wolf howled. Gleipnir quivered, glowing faintly against the pull of prophecy. Fenrir's voice rolled across the worlds. One hand lost, he roared. One hand left. When chains break, I will take the other and the gods with it. Mortals trembled in their huts. Giants laughed in their mountains. Even Hel tilted her pale head to listen. And in Asgard, some gods muttered fear, others muttered envy, and still others muttered rebellion. Tyr heard every murmur. He answered none, because justice does not argue with whispers. It waits until the walls of lies fall down by themselves. On the wall, cloak drawn tight, Tyr watched the moon. His sword rested under his single hand. The wind carried the wolf's growl and the gods' envy in equal measure. He whispered almost to himself, almost to the stars, if the chains break, and they will, then let them break on me first. Better my body than the law. Better my blood than the promise. The stars did not answer. The night only deepened. And far away, Gleipnir hummed, a lullaby too fragile for the beast it held. And so ended the first chapter of Tyr's tale. The god with one hand, the wolf with one hunger, and the All-Father with one silence too heavy to ignore. But you know and I know that chains like silences are not forever. Mortals do not forget quickly, especially not the sight of God who bleeds for a promise. By the time the first snows crusted the fields of Midgard, Tyr's name was louder than thunder. Farmers traced his rune into their bread before baking, so that every loaf carried law in its crust. Sailors carved it into their oars, whispering, "Let the sea test me, but let me not betray it." Children touched their wrists, mimicking the absent hand, and said, "A vow stands even when I don't." Tyr did not ask for these gestures. He only walked among them, quiet as snowfall, his cloak hiding the wound, his voice steady when he reminded them, "Keep your word, even when it hurts, especially when it hurts." And mortals, unlike gods, love him more for the wound than the glory. In Asgard, the same wound birthed envy. At the high table, Thor grumbled into his mug. They sing his name, not mine. Do they think hammer blows don't matter? Who keeps the storms at bay? Who smashes giants? Loki leaned across, smirk curling. Ah, brother, mortals admire muscles, yes, but they worship scars. And Tyr's scar is carved deeper than yours. Thor raised his hammer, as if to argue, then set it down again, muttering. Fregg's voice cut softer, but sharper. Mortals whisper his judgments, as if they are law above Odin's. That balance cannot hold. And Odin said nothing. He only stared at Tyr across the hall, his eyes storm dark, his silence heavier than feasting. Fenrir's whispers seeped further. Gleipnir held his body, yes, but no chain can muzzle a voice. "You see it, don't you?" he murmured into the night. "They envy you. They fear you. They will betray you, just as you betrayed me. And when I rise, they will not stop me. They will help me." The younger gods heard his growl in their dreams. Some woke sweating, some woke tempted. None spoke of it aloud. One evening, a quarrel split the council. Njord, god of the sea, demanded rights to tribute from coastal shrines. Freyr countered, saying the people had sworn first to his fields. Voices rose, fists slammed tables. "Judge it," Odin said coldly, and all eyes turned to Tyr. He stood, his cloak falling heavy at his side, his single hand resting on the table. His voice was calm, even patient, the voice of scales refusing to tip for shouting. The sea feeds the land. The land feeds the sea. One oath cannot erase the other. Share the tribute and let both oaths stand. Silence followed. Njord frowned. Freyr hesitated. Then both nodded, grudging, but nods nonetheless. The quarrel ended. The hall exhaled. And once again, it was Tyr who had weighed the storm. But Odin's eye narrowed, deeper than before. That night, Tyr walked the walls. He heard Fenrir's laugh on the wind. "You bind them too," the wolf growled. "Not with chains, but with words. But chains break, and words they betray." Tyr's hand tightened on his sword. "Then let them betray me first. I will not betray them." The stars flickered above. Gleipnir hummed faintly in the distance, and the night waited. Mortals have a way of speaking truth without knowing it. They do not weigh their words as gods do. They carve them into wood, whisper them over bread, sing them at firelight, and somehow those words travel further than ravens. By now, the shrines to Tyr had grown. Not vast, golden temples like Odin's, nor roaring halls like Thor's. They were smaller, stone circles on hills, wooden beams by rivers, hearth fires in homes. But they burned steady, and steadiness to mortals is holier than thunder. When men swore oaths before battle, they spoke Tyr's name. When women bound marriages, they pressed his rune into the soil. When children argued over toys, they cried, "By Tyr, it's mine!" Even laughter had begun to carry his echo. And Odin noticed. The All-Father sat in his high seat, Hlithjaf, gazing out across the worlds. His eyes saw shrines glow with Tyr's rune, fires burning with his vow. The sound of oaths, once his pride, now rang in another god's name. Frigg laid a hand on his arm. "You should not begrudge him." He gave his hand to keep the wolf. Odin's jaw tightened. "And yet mortals whisper his law louder than mine. What good is sacrifice if it dethrones the throne?" Frigg's eyes were sorrowful. Perhaps it is not dethroning. Perhaps it is reminding. But Odin's silence was heavier than her comfort. In Asgard's feast, the envy sharpened. Some gods mocked Tyr's single hand. Others avoided his gaze. A few, secretly, touched their wrists as mortals did, ashamed of how much they respected him. Loki, of course, turned it all into theater. He slithered between benches, whispering. "One hand holds more weight than many. Funny, isn't it? Perhaps we should all cut one off to earn such worship." Thor growled, ready to smash the table. "Enough, trickster." But Tyr only sat in silence, drinking little, speaking less. His presence itself was heavier than Loki's words. And Fenrir fed on it, bounding Gleipnir. His laugh rolled like thunder disguised as mirth. "You see it, don't you, one-handed god? They envy you. They hate you. They will betray you. And when I rise, you'll be first to fall, not by my jaws, but by theirs." The chain groaned under his fury. Gleipnir held, but every howl was a prophecy rehearsed. That night, Tyr walked alone as he always did. He stopped by a shrine at the edge of Midgard, where children had left bread and a wooden toy sword marked with his rune. He touched it with his one hand. His eyes softened. "Keep your word," he whispered, "even if it costs you, especially then." The stars shivered. The wolf growled. And Asgard whispered with envy sharper than teeth. The council chamber was heavy with voices, louder than usual, sharper than usual. Disputes filled the benches. Gods arguing over tribute, giants whispering threats at the borders, mortals demanding judgment for quarrels to tangle for themselves. At the high seat, Odin listened, one hand on his spear, one eye storm-dark. But when the argument swelled to shouts, he lifted his hand. The hall quieted, not from respect, but from habit. Judge it, Odin commanded. His voice echoed through the chamber. Tyr, give your verdict. All eyes turned. Tyr stood, cloak falling heavy, his single hand resting steady on the table. The mortals of Midgard swore first to Freyr for harvest, Odin pressed. Yet they now offer tribute to Njord for seas. This weakens their vows. Tell them to choose one oath and let it bind them. It was a trap, simple, sharp. To bind one oath was to break another. Tyr's gaze swept the room. His voice was calm, low, but carried like iron rolling across stone. An oath is not rope to be cut and tied elsewhere. An oath binds what it touches. If mortals swore to both, then both stand. Let them divide tribute and keep both vows. The hall murmured. Some nodded, some scoffed. Odin's eye narrowed. You risk weakness, he said. I risk falsehood if I bend law for convenience, Tyr replied. Odin's silence deepened, heavy as chains. Later, in the feast hall, whispers spread like wildfire. He defied Odin. He judges even the All-Father. He sets law above the throne. Loki, delighted, poured himself another cup. Oh, how delicious! The one-handed god dares weigh the All-Father, and his scales tip heavier. Who writes these sagas? I must thank them. Thor slammed a fist on the table. Enough, trickster. He kept the truth. Yes, Loki purred. And truth has a nasty habit of cutting kings. Fenrir's laugh rolled from the plains where Gleipnir held him. You see it now, don't you, Tyr? They whisper against you. They sharpen envy into daggers. They will betray you long before I rise. And when I do, I will find you already bleeding. The chains quivered. The wolf strained. But Gleipnir did not snap. Not yet. That night, Tyr stood again on the wall, cloaked tight against the cold. His single hand rested on his sword. If they betray me, he whispered to the stars, then I will bleed twice. Once for them, once for the vow. And the wind carried his words across the 9 worlds, where mortals whispered his name louder than ever, and gods envied him more deeply still. Storms do not always arrive with thunder. Sometimes they arrive as questions, asked softly, but sharp enough to cut mountains. That was the storm Odin brought to the council the next day. The gods filled the benches, their voices restless. The air was thick with rumor, and every eye glanced at Tyr as if it already answered a question not yet asked. Odin rose, his cloak heavy, ravens stirring overhead. His one eye burned, not with fury, but with something colder. Tyr, he said, voice quiet enough to hush the chamber. You gave your hand to bind the wolf. You kept the vow when no one else dared. For that, Asgard endured. But tell me now, is your loyalty to Asgard or to the law you keep? The silence was sharp. Even Thor lowered his hammer, uncertain. Loki's smirk grew wide as a knife. Tyr stood, cloak falling back, his one hand steady on the table. His gaze did not waver. My loyalty is to truth. Without truth, Asgard is only walls waiting to fall. The chamber rippled. Some gods nodded fiercely. Others hissed. Odin's eye darkened. And if truth and throne divide, Tyr's jaw tightened. Then the throne must move. Not truth. Gasps rang. Murmurs spread like fire. Loki clapped slowly, delighted. Oh, magnificent. The god who weighs even kings. The sagas will eat this for breakfast. That night, the feast was uneasy. Thor drank heavily, glancing often at Tyr. Freyr muttered that Tyr had spoken well. Njord scoffed. Heimdall watched in silence, his golden eyes flickering like dawn. And Odin said nothing. His silence was heavier than chains. On the plain where Gleipnir bit into the soil, Fenrir stirred. His laugh rolled like an avalanche. You see, don't you, one-handed god? They turn against you. They whisper betrayal. Even the All-Father tests you. They will not stand by you when chains snap. You will be alone, and I will not. The chain hummed. The wolf strained. Gleipnir held, but it quivered under prophecy. Tyr stood again on the wall, cloak drawn tight. The stars flickered above, steady as witnesses. His sword rested under his hand. "I do not need them to stand by me," he murmured. "I need only to stand by the vow." And the wind carried his words, across shrines, across seas, across hearts, where mortals whispered his name louder still. Dreams are the only court where even gods must stand trial. And lately, Tyr's nights had become nothing but summons. He dreamed of Fenrir's eyes first, gold burning like forge fire, unblinking, endless. Then of the jaws, yawning wider than the sky, sharper than storms, dripping with stars. And always in the center of that darkness, his own hand, whole again, but already between those teeth, waiting to be devoured. The dream repeated night after night. Sometimes Gleipnir quivered. Sometimes it snapped. Sometimes it dissolved like smoke. But always, always, the jaws closed, and Tyr woke with his stump burning, as if the wound were fresh. One night, the dream grew sharper. Tyr stood on the plain of Vigrid, endless and barren. The wolf towered above him, Gleipnir trailing in broken strands. Odin stood far behind, spear raised, silent. The other gods were gone. Only Tyr, his sword, and the wolf. "Your law is nothing," Fenrir growled, each word shaking the ground. "Your sacrifice is nothing. Oaths are chains, and chains break." Tyr lifted his sword with one hand. "Then I will be chain enough." The jaws opened. The dream ended. He woke before dawn, sweat on his brow, the stump of his arm aching. The stars were fading, the sky paling, but the howl still rang in his ears. On the wall, Odin stood waiting. His cloak fluttered, his eyes storm-dark. "You dream of him, too," he said. Tyr did not deny it. "Dreams are warnings." "Dreams are traps," Odin muttered. "The wolf whispers even there." "Or truths," Tyr replied. Odin's jaw tightened. "If the dream shows your death, will you still walk to meet it?" Tyr's answer was simple. "If the vow requires it." Odin turned away, his silence heavier than the question. That day, Tyr judged disputes in hall as always. Farmers over fields, warriors over spoils, lovers over oaths. His voice was steady, his hand firm. But behind his gaze, the dream gnawed, and Fenrir laughed from the plains. "Dreams show you truth, one-handed God. The jaws will close. The chain will break. And when it does, all you have built will fall with you." Tyr stood on the wall at dusk, watching the stars appear. His sword rested beneath his hand. His voice was quiet, steady, almost prayer. "Then let me fall his law. Let me break his vow. Better that than bend." The night did not answer, but the stars flickered, as if they, too, had weighed the verdict. Prophecy is a shadow even the sun cannot banish, and Odin, more than any, lived beneath it. The Allfather had long known the words of the Volva, that the wolf would swallow him at the end of days, that no chain could hold forever, that jaws would close around the storm, and silence would follow. And so Odin began to weave his secret nets. At first, they looked like strategy. Extra guards at the plain where Gleipnir bit the soil. Priests whispering new chants in shrines. Prayers angled toward the spear instead of the scales. Messengers sent across the worlds, gathering weapons, forging alliances. But Tyr saw the pattern, because law notices what others call coincidence. One evening, as the council debated, Odin spoke with unusual calm. "The wolf will break his bonds. When he does, it must not be Tyr who meets him, but I. The Allfather must face prophecy, not the one-handed God who courts worship through pity." The words were sharp, but sharper still was the silence after them. Thor shifted uneasily. Heimdall's eyes narrowed. Frigg sighed. Loki grinned like a knife. And Tyr? Tyr did not rise to the bait. His voice was calm, steady, even. "You may claim the battle, but you cannot erase the vow. The wolf remembers my hand, not yours." The hall murmured. Odin's eye burned. Later, in the feast hall, Loki sidled up to Tyr. smirking as always. Careful. The All-Father does not like to share prophecy. He swallows it whole, like he hopes to swallow the wolf. But you've already left your hand between those teeth. That makes you prophecy's favorite toy. Tyr did not answer, but his gaze was heavy enough to quiet even Loki's grin. For a moment, that night on the plain, Fenrir stirred. Gleipnir glowed faintly, trembling. You see it, don't you? The wolf growled. He fears me. He fears you. He will cut you down before I even rise. Better we end this now, you and I. The chain quivered. The soil shook, but Gleipnir held. Tyr stood on the wall, hearing the howl. His hand rested on his sword. His voice was steady. Then let him fear. I will not bend. If I must bleed twice, once the chain, once the throne, then so be it. The stars above flickered, as if weighing the cost. Whispers have teeth sharper than spears. They bite not flesh, but trust. And soon, Fenrir's voice was no longer just a howl on the plain. It was a murmur in the ears of Asgard's younger gods. You see him, don't you? The wolf's growl crept into dreams. The one-handed god, judging you, binding you, weighing you heavier than himself. Why should a scar rule your oaths? Why should his law chain your will? When Gleipnir snaps, I will free you. I will free all. Some awoke sweating. Some awoke nodding. And some, though they did not admit it aloud, began to wonder if Tyr's law was only another chain. In the feast hall, tension grew thicker than mead. Jord muttered that Tyr's verdicts cut too sharp. Freyr bristled at every glance toward the scales. Even Thor, though loyal, clenched his jaw when mortals sang Tyr's name louder than his own. Loki, of course, delighted in the storm. He slithered from bench to bench, whispering poison with a smile. Perhaps law is just another throne, he said sweetly. And perhaps the one-handed god likes the taste of power after all. Who judges a judge whom? The word spread, sticky as honey, sharp as nettles. Yet mortals clung tighter. They prayed louder. Shrines to Tyr glowed brighter. Farmers carved his rune deeper into plows. Sailors sang his name over storms. Children whispered before bed, let me keep my word, like Tyr kept his. And Tyr walked among them, silent as always, steady as stone. His presence itself became a verdict. He did not defend himself. He did not deny the envy. He only reminded them, an oath is weight. Do not drop it. But Odin saw more. He saw Asgard dividing, whispers leaning toward Tyr, whispers leaning toward him. And though his silence was heavier than thunder, it was Loki who gave the thought words. One hand holds a wolf, the trickster purred, but the other hand, the one that's missing, holds Asgard heart. Careful, All-Father. If you wait too long, prophecy may crown the wrong god. Odin's eye darkened. His silence became storm. On the plain, Fenrir laughed, thrashing against Gleipnir. The chain groaned, stretched, sang its thin song of resistance. You hear it too, don't you? He roared. The gods doubt you. The throne doubts you. Only I see you true. Only I know your courage. When I rise, Tyr, I will not kill you first. I will make you watch as they betray you. Tyr stood on the wall, his hand resting on his sword. His gaze was calm, steady, unbroken. Then let me watch, he whispered. And when they betray me, I will still keep the vow. The stars flickered, uneasy. The night waited, and the wolf's laughter shook the roots of the world. The council chamber smelled of iron and storm. Not because Thor had cracked his mug again, though he had, but because Odin's silence was pressing down heavier than usual. It was a kind of silence that promised a question sharp enough to bleed someone. At last, Odin rose. His cloak brushed the floor like a tide, his one eye burning storm-dark. There is unrest among the shrines, he said. Mortals quarrel over offerings. They swear oaths to Tyr when they should swear them to me. This weakens Asgard. This weakens law. Tell us, one-handed god, what is your judgment? All eyes turned. Some gods leaned forward, eager for Tyr to stumble. Others clenched fists, willing him to stand steady. Tyr rose. His cloak fell heavy at his side, his single hand resting flat upon the table. His gaze moved from Odin to the benches. then to the hall itself. His voice was calm, deliberate, carved from stone. Mortals do not weaken Asgard when they keep their oaths. They strengthen it. If they swear by my name, it is because they see truth in sacrifice. Truth does not lessen the throne. It steadies it. Let them keep their vows, to me, to you, to all. Let them stand together, not apart. The chamber murmured. Thor slammed his mug down in agreement. Freyr nodded. Heimdall's golden eyes glimmered with approval. But Odin's face darkened. You place your law above the throne, he said softly. You risk rebellion in the name of truth. Tyr met his gaze. Better rebellion than falsehood, for falsehood will break the chain faster than Fenrir. The air cracked. The benches rippled with unease. Loki clapped once, grinning wide. Ah, yes, rebellion wrapped in righteousness. How delicious. To go on. Later, the hall buzzed with whispers. Some gods muttered that Tyr's verdict was treason in disguise. Others whispered that perhaps his voice was the only one still steady. Fenrir's howl rolled over them all. From the plain where Gleipnir bit deep, his laugh shook the night. See, one-handed God, even your truths split them. Even your justice breaks their unity. You think yourself savior, but you are the wedge. You are the crack. And when chains snap, you will find yourself blamed for the ruin. The chain groaned, quivered, but did not break. Not yet. That night, Tyr walked the walls as always. His sword rested beneath his single hand. He looked at the stars, steady and cold. Let them blame me, he whispered. Let them betray me. I will not betray the vow. And the stars flickered like witnesses writing down every word. The council chamber was crowded again, but this time the air itself seemed brittle, as if one wrong word might shatter the rafters. Odin sat high on the throne, Gungnir across his lap, his one eye burning like storm trapped in ice. He did not waste words. There's a quarrel in Midgard. 2 clans claim the same river. If they fight, the blood will weaken the borders. We need the stronger clan to hold it. Judge in their favor. Tyr, that is my will. Gasps stirred the benches. Odin had never been so blunt, never so political in his command. All eyes turned to Tyr. His cloak heavy, his thumb bound, his single hand resting steady on the table. He rose. His voice was calm, deliberate, but iron-strong. Law is not will. Oath is not convenience. Both clans swore the river would be shared. If one breaks that vow, then both are shamed. The river does not belong to strength. It belongs to truth. The chamber erupted. Some shouted approval. Others hissed treason. Odin's eye narrowed. You would weaken Asgard for principle? Tyr's jaw set. I would strengthen it with principle. Strength without truth is sand. It slips no matter how tightly you grasp it. The silence that followed was heavier than thunder. Loki leaned back, grinning, hands folded behind his head. Ah, exquisite. Tyr weighs the All-Father and finds him wanting. The sagas will be unbearable after this. Later, in the feast hall, the divide was clearer than ever. Some gods raised cups to Tyr. Others refused to sit at his table. Thor muttered in his beard, but did not speak against him. Heimdall's watchful eyes flickered like dawn. Frigg's face was sorrowful. And Odin sat in silence, drinking slowly, his gaze fixed on Tyr like a spear waiting for the right moment to strike. On the plain, Fenrir strained. Gleipnir glowed, trembling. The wolf's laugh rolled, sharp and cruel. You see it now, don't you, one-handed god? The throne hates you. The council envies you. You are alone, except for me. When chains snap, you'll have no one left but jaws. And I will welcome you. The chain quivered, but held. Tyr stood on the walls at dusk, watching the horizon. His sword rested under his single hand. His voice was steady, his verdict quiet as ever. Then let me be alone. Better alone in vow than surrounded in lies. The stars above flickered. The wolf laughed, and Asgard's whispers sharpened into knives. Whispers are softer than steel, but they cut deeper. By now, Asgard was full of them. Every feast, every council, every walk on the golden streets carried Tyr's name like a blade passed hand to hand. Some sharpened it into reverence, polishing his deeds and a legend before he had even drawn his next breath. Others dulled it into envy, grinding the shine into suspicion, muttering that no god should hold such sway over mortals or mortals alike. And Odin, the All-Father, heard them all. He heard them in the shuffle of sandals across Valis Jaff's marble floors, in the silence before the toasts at golden feasts, in the raven's flight that seemed too hurried, too uncertain. Whispers slipped into the spaces between words, settling like frost in Odin's beard. They clung to him, echoing when he tried to sleep, nagging when he tried to shape visions on Hlidskjalf. The All-Father had endured centuries of counsel and prophecy, but nothing unnerved him quite like hearing his own name grow quiet, while tears grew louder. At last, in counsel, he spoke. His voice was low, measured, heavy, as if each syllable had to bear the weight of 9 worlds. "Tyr," he said, "your judgment spread across the realms. Mortals bow to your law. Even gods weigh your words heavier than mine." He paused, letting the truth sting the chamber. "This cannot stand. If Asgard is to survive, it must be ruled by one voice. Mine." The council hall hushed. Not even a breath dared challenge the silence. Tyr rose, calm as the dawn before battle. His single hand rested on the carved table, the scarred stump of the other hidden in his cloak. His gaze was steady, his voice unmoving. A stone said in the river divine politics. Then let your voice keep truth, and it will stand. But if it bends truth, no throne can hold it. Murmurs rippled like distant thunder. Some gods nodded, their loyalty tugged by the gravity of Tyr's words. Others hissed, recoiling from his audacity. Odin's one eye burned storm-dark, a tempest gathering behind it. His fingers clenched the armrest of his throne, as if to steady the worlds themselves. "You tread a dangerous path, one-handed god." Tyr did not flinch. His voice was even, carrying not defiance but inevitability. Law does not walk safe paths. It walks necessary ones. The silence that followed was sharp as spear point. Even the torches seemed to bend toward it, their flames shrinking in reverence or fear. And then, Loki, the trickster, leaned back in his chair, slow applause echoing in the hall. He grinned like fire licking the edge of dry wood. Oh, exquisite. Father against judge. Storm against scale. The sagas are practically writing themselves. Do carry on. The Skald will need a climax. Some laughed nervously. Others cursed him. But none could dismiss the shadow he cast with those words. That night, Odin stood alone on Hlidskjalf, the high seat of sight, gazing into the 9 worlds. His jaw was tight, his silence heavier than prophecy itself. The vast expanse stretched before him, stars glimmering like nails hammered into the fabric of fate. Hugin and Munin shifted uneasily, as if even thought and memory feared to linger in that silence. The All-Father's mind stormed. Power unshared was survival. Power divided was doom. Yet in Tyr, he saw a truth that could not be undone. And truth was often the most dangerous weapon of all. Below, on Asgard's walls, Tyr walked alone. His sword rested beneath his single hand, not drawn, not needed, for his true weapon was the steadiness of his gaze. He did not watch the gods within the halls, nor the whispers slithering through them. His eyes turned outward, toward the plains. There, under moonlight, Gleipnir trembled. The wolf strained, massive muscles shifting under its fur, golden threads biting deep into its flesh. Each pull shook the soil, each breath rolled thunder into the night. Fenrir's voice rose, carried by rage, hunger, prophecy itself. It rolled across the night like a tide of doom. You see it, don't you? You are already more feared than trusted, more envied than loved. When these chains break, and they will, you'll have no counsel, no throne, no friends. Only me and my jaws. The chain groaned, taut as a line between worlds. The earth beneath Tyr's boots quivered, dust falling from the stones of Asgard's walls. Yet Gleipnir still held. The impossible ribbon of dwarven craft sang its faint, eerie hum, fragile as a lullaby, strong as eternity. Tyr's voice carried steady into wind, firm as granite laid before storms. Then let me have only you. Better to meet the jaws in truth than sit safe in a hall of lies. The stars flickered overhead, dimmed as though listening. And Fenrir laughed, A laugh like mountains cracking, rivers boiling, skies splitting. It echoed across the plain, into the marrow of every god that heard it. And in Odin's silence, prophecy sharpened its teeth. So ended this turning of Tyr's saga, the god of law, who carried truth heavier than any blade, the wolf of prophecy, whose hunger was patience itself, and the throne that saw both his threats, storm and scale, truth and power, locked in a dance no chain could bind forever. But you know, and I know, that chains cannot hum forever. Cracks are sly things. They start so thin that even the sun ignores them. A hairline in a stone wall, a whisper in a crowded hall, a glance too long across a feast table. But left alone, they widen. And in Asgard, the cracks were beginning to show. It began with the younger gods again. They huddled at the edges of feasts, voices low, eyes darting toward Tyr at the high table. His word weighs heavier than Odin's, one whispered. He gave his hand. What did the All-Father give? Asked another. Perhaps Tyr should judge more than Odes. A third muttered. Perhaps he should rule. Loki's grin slithered between them like smoke. The sweetest poison, ambition disguised as admiration. Drink deep, little gods. Drink deep. Mortals, meanwhile, poured more love upon Tyr than ever. Shrines multiplied. Songs grew louder. Warriors swore by his rune before battle. Brides traced his mark on their foreheads. Farmers set aside the first grain of harvest in his honor. And though Tyr accepted none of it for himself, his silence was read as blessing, his steadiness as promise, his sacrifice as proof. Where mortals saw courage, the gods saw danger. In council, Odin tested him again. The giants press at our borders. They demand tribute. If we refuse, war comes. If we pay, shame follows. What is your judgment, Tyr? The hall held its breath. Tyr rose, his single hand steady on the table. If tribute is given under threat, it is no oath at all. To pay it is to break the law's strength. To refuse it is to keep truth, even if war comes. The chamber erupted. Some shouted in approval. Others cursed. Odin's eye burned. You would risk war for principle? Tyr's voice was calm. I would risk war for law. Without it, war comes anyway, only cloaked in falsehood. The silence that followed was sharper than steel. That night, Fenrir's howl rolled across the 9 worlds. Gleipnir trembled. The wolf laughed, cruel and certain. You see it, one-handed god? The All-Father despises you. The council doubts you. The mortals worship you. When the chain breaks, I will rise into a world already split. Thanks to you. Tyr stood on the wall, cloak tight, sword beneath his hand. His voice was steady, carried to the stars. Then let it split on truth. Better truth, divide us than lies bind us. The stars flickered. The wolf laughed. And in Asgard, the cracks widened. Storms announced themselves with thunder. But the greater danger is the silence before, the stillness where every bird hides, every branch waits, every breath feels borrowed. That was the silence in Odin's chamber when he summoned Tyr alone. The walls flickered with torchlight. Ravens perched above, restless, their claws scraping wood. Gungnir rested across the All-Father's lap, gleaming faintly. His single eye burned storm-dark. You know what they whisper. Odin said, they call you judge of gods. They weigh your word against mine. They see law where they should see throne. You are pulling Asgard apart, one verdict at a time. Tyr stood steady, cloak falling heavy, his single hand resting at his side. I do not pull. I hold. It is the lies that break Asgard, not the law. Odin's jaw tightened. And if law and throne cannot walk together? Tyr's gaze did not waver. Then throne must move. Law cannot. The silence cracked like a drawn bowstring. Odin rose slowly, Gungnir in hand. His voice dropped to iron. You walk close to treason, one-handed god. Tyr's answer was steady. Then call truth treason. I will still keep it. The torches hissed. The ravens stirred. And Odin's silence fell heavier than chains. Outside, Asgard whispered. Some gods claimed Tyr had defied the All-Father openly. Others swore he was the only one keeping Asgard from falling into shadow. Feasts grew quieter. Arguments sharper, benches divided. Loki, of course, delighted. He leaned across tables, murmuring, "Oh, how sweet it is! A throne cracking, a law unbending, a wolf waiting. I could not have written it better myself." Thor slammed his mug, muttering, "Enough," but even his voice carried less thunder than before. And Fenrir laughed. His howl rolled across the plains, rattling Gleipnir's links. "Yes, one-handed god. You fight the All-Father himself now. The cracks are wide. Soon they will break. And when they do, you will not need me to destroy Asgard. You will have already done it." The chain groaned. The soil trembled. The wolf's eyes burned gold in the night. Tyr stood once more on the wall, sword beneath his hand. He looked at the stars, steady, silent, unblinking. His voice was low, but firm enough to carry. Let them call it treason. Let them call it rebellion. Better to bleed for truth than live safe in lies. And the stars flickered as if they, too, were weighing the words. Eyes can weigh more than chains. Tyr felt them now, heavier than any iron he had ever known. Wherever he walked, through the feast hall, across the walls, into the council, he could feel Odin's watchers. Silent gods placed near doors. Ravens lingering too long on rafters. Servants who bowed but did not blink. The All-Father had not spoken another threat. He did not need to. His silence had turned into eyes. At first, Tyr ignored them. He carried on judging disputes with the same calm steadiness that had made his name ripple across 9 worlds. Mortals squabbling over rivers, gods quarreling over tribute, warriors demanding honor, kings bargaining for justice. His verdicts remained sharp, unbending, cutting through pride and excuse alike. And mortals clung to them as lifelines, as if each word he spoke was a beam strong enough to cross a storming sea. But the whispers grew. "Do you see how Odin watches him?" One god muttered in the shadows of the hall. "Perhaps the All-Father fears him," another replied, half in awe, half in suspicion. "Or perhaps he is already a traitor, waiting to be caught," whispered a third, eager to believe treachery before loyalty. The cracks widened. It was not Tyr's words that shook the walls of Asgard, but the echo of those words in the mouths of others. Every ruling he gave, every silence he held, was no longer his alone. It became fodder for whispers, sparks fed into flame by envy, by fear, by prophecy that had not yet come to pass but weighed upon all hearts like a storm seen on the horizon. Even Thor, loyal as thunder, grew restless. At a feast, he leaned across the table, golden hair shadowed by doubt, his voice low but urgent. "Brother," he said, "speak plain. Do you seek the throne? Do you wish to rule?" The question struck harder than any hammer. Tyr's gaze was calm, his voice steady, his hand firm on the table, though he had only one. "I seek only truth." Thor's jaw tightened. He wanted to believe. By Mjolnir, he wanted to. Yet doubt, once planted, gnawed like roots through stone. And even thunder knows the sound of crumbling rock. Across the hall, Loki laughed. His smile was a dagger, his words a twist. "Oh, Thunderer, do not fret. Tyr does not want the throne. The throne wants Tyr, that is the problem." Thor's hand twitched, knuckles whitening, nearly striking him. But the silence that followed was heavier than any blow. Even laughter could not break it. And Fenrir fed on it all. Bounding Gleipnir, he whispered into the night, his voice a river of venom, winding its way through Tyr's ears though leagues of stone and air separated them. "They doubt you, one-handed god. Even your allies hesitate. Even your friends question. You are already alone. When I rise, we'll find no counsel, no shield, no brother beside you. Only me?" The chain quivered under his pull. The soil shook as if remembering an older time, when chaos walked free. Gleipnir still held, thin as silk yet harder than hope itself. But the wolf's laugh split the night like thunder shattering mountains. Tyr stood on the wall, cloak wrapped tight, sword beneath a single hand. His eyes scanned the plains, though he knew no army yet marched, no enemy yet approached. The enemy was already here, in whispers, in doubt, in silence. His voice was low, steady, as if speaking only to the stars. "Then let me be alone. Truth needs no crowd. Law needs no chorus. One vow is enough. The stars flickered, their light cold but constant, the only witnesses who never whispered. Yet even the stars did not ease the weight of eyes. He felt them behind him always. In the hush of feasts, in the silence of council, in the tightening of Thor's hand on his cup, in the raven's shadow stretching too far across the wall. Eyes heavier than chains, chains heavier than fate. For fate was no longer just prophecy. It had become posture, silence, stare. Every god in Asgard carried Ragnarok in their gaze, as a watching Tyr would keep the end from rising. But Tyr knew, chains hum until they break. Whispers crawl until they bite. And the eyes of gods, once fixed on you, never truly look away. The council chamber had grown colder, not from winter's hand, though frost clung to windows, but from Odin's silence. It filled the hall like smoke, seeping into every breath. When at last he spoke, his voice was calm, too calm. The kind of calm that hides a blade. There's a quarrel in Midgard, Odin said. Two lords swore loyalty to me, but now they war against each other. Their oaths cannot both stand. One must be false. Judge it, Tyr. The trap gleamed like steel. If Tyr chose one oath, he would break the other. If he called both false, he would shame Odin's name. If he hesitated, he would prove the whispers true, that even law can falter. The chamber held its breath. Tyr rose. His cloak fell heavy, his single hand steady on the table. His voice was calm, carved in stone. An oath sworn and broken is no oath. An oath sworn and kept is law. If both swore to you and yet fight, then both have already broken their word. Strip them both. Let neither hold your name. Better no oath than false oaths. The chamber rippled. Some gods gasped. Others nodded grimly. Odin's I darkened, storm-sharp. You shame me before the hall. Tyr's gaze did not waver. I shame only those who broke their vow. If they drag your name through falsehood, it is justice that clears it, not silence. The silence after was heavier than iron. Loki broke it, of course. Oh, magnificent! He strips mortals of their oaths, and in the same breath, cleans the All-Father's name. Do you see it? Tyr crowns himself the protector of even Odin's honor. Delicious irony. The laughter that followed was uneasy, sharp. That night, Odin sat alone on Hlidskjalf, Gungnir across his knees. His jaw was tight, his silence heavier than prophecy. And far below, Fenrir laughed. Gleipnir groaned under his thrashing. His voice rolled like thunder. You see it, don't you, one-handed god? You shame him. You defy him. You raise yourself above him. Soon the All-Father will strike you down himself, and when he does, I will be waiting. The chain quivered, but held. For now, on the wall, Tyr stood steady, cloak wrapped tight, sword under his hand. His voice was low, steady, carried only to the stars. Then let him strike. I will still keep the vow. Let me bleed for truth, even if it costs the throne itself. The stars flickered, cold and unblinking. The wolf laughed, and Odin's silence deepened into shadow. Divisions grow like cracks in ice, unseen beneath the surface, until one step makes the whole lake shatter. By now, Asgard's ice was creaking. Some gods whispered openly that Tyr's words steadied the worlds more than Odin's spear. The one-handed god gave his blood, they said. The All-Father gave only silence. Others snarled that Tyr was pride in disguise, that he dressed rebellion in the cloak of law. No throne can stand beside another, they muttered. If Tyr weighs even Odin, then he weighs himself too heavy. Feasts grew colder, councils sharper. Even the air in Asgard seemed tense, stretched like a bowstring. Odin saw it all. He did not shout, did not strike, but his silence was sharper than Gungnir. He began to move his pieces quietly, placing guards near shrines, steering warriors away from Tyr's shadow, sending ravens to spy more closely. And in his chamber, he whispered to Frigg, If the wolf does not devour me, envy will. Either jaws or justice will break the throne. Frigg's reply was sorrowful. Perhaps it is not justice that breaks you, but your refusal to bend to it. Odin's silence was his only answer. Fenrir fed on all of it, bound in Gleipnir. He laughed louder than ever. His voice rolled like thunder across the plains. Yes, one-handed God. They break themselves. They split and snarl. They whisper your name and curse it in the same breath. I need not strain against chains. I need only wait. When Gleipnir snaps, you will already be alone. Alone except for me. The chain groaned, trembling like a bough under too much draw. Gleipnir still held, but its hum was thin, fragile. That night, Tyr stood on the wall, his cloak wrapped tight, his sword resting under his hand. He looked at the stars, unblinking, steady. His voice was quiet, carved into the air like a rune. Let them split, let them envy, let them strike. I will keep the vow. Even if Asgard itself calls it treason, I will keep it. The stars flickered, cold witnesses. The wolf laughed, and Odin's silence grew heavier than prophecy. Thus ended part 3 of Tyr's saga. The cracks of Asgard, the silence of Odin, and the vow that would not bend. But you know, and I know, that cracks do not heal. They widen, and one day they break. Chains sing when stretched, a faint hum, a warning, a promise. By the time part 4 of Tyr's saga begins, Gleipnir's song had become constant, a note of tension vibrating beneath every word in Asgard. Odin summoned the council again. This time, his cloak hung heavier, his one eye darker, his voice sharper. The wolf strains against prophecy, he said. The chain will not hold forever. We must prepare. But there is division among us. Some whisper that Tyr, not Odin, is keeper of Asgard. This must end. His gaze cut across the hall, landing on Tyr like a spear. Judge yourself, Odin said. The chamber froze. Even Loki's grin faltered for a heartbeat. Tyr rose. His cloak fell heavy, his one hand resting firm on the table. His voice was calm, steady, unbending. I am not throne. I am not crown. I am law. If my judgments divide, it is because truth cuts falsehood apart. Better division on stone than unity on sand. The words rang like iron dropped in silence. Some gods nodded, eyes fierce with agreement. Others muttered, faces twisted with envy. Odin's jaw tightened. Then law will stand apart. Alone. The silence that followed was heavier than chains. Later, Loki drifted between benches. His grin returned, sharper than before. Oh, how perfect! The All-Father demands a confession, and the judge refuses to plead. A saga writes itself. Shall I name it the hand that weighed the throne? Thor slammed his mug. Enough! But even Thunder's voice sounded thin against the whispers. And Fenrir laughed. His growl rolled across the plains, shaking soil, trembling Gleipnir. Yes, one-handed God. Even now he casts you out. Even now he names you alone. When I rise, I will not need to kill you. They will have done it already. The chain strained. The hum grew sharper. On the wall, Tyr stood alone, sword under his hand, cloak heavy against the wind. His voice was quiet, but steady. Then let me be alone. Better exile in truth than company in lies. The stars flickered. The wolf laughed. And Odin's silence darkened into shadow. Traps rarely announce themselves with teeth. They look like choices. Simple, harmless, necessary. And Odin, master foresight, set them with silence sharper than any spear. At council, the All-Father spoke with unusual softness. Two warriors quarrel. One swore by your name, Tyr, the other by mine. Their oaths collide. Which shall stand? The chamber stiffened. Everyone knew this was no quarrel of mortals. It was a snare of gods. Tyr rose. His cloak fell heavy, his single hand firm on the table. His voice was calm, deliberate, cut from stone. Both oaths stand. The vow is not measured by whose name it bears, but by the truth it holds. If either breaks, let the breaker bear shame, not the name. The hall murmured, rippling with unease. Odin's one eye burned storm-dark. And if both break, then both fall, Tyr said. The silence after was heavier than chains. Later, whispers spilled from the feast tables. Some gods claimed Tyr had placed himself equal to Odin. Others whispered he had placed himself above. Loki, of course, spread the fire with a grin. Oh, how clever! He weighs oaths by truth, not by name, which makes the All-Father's word no heavier than his own. Do you see it? The handless God has just balanced the throne on his scale. Thor slammed his fist on the table. He spoke only truth. Ah, Loki purred, and truth cuts crowns quicker than swords. And Fenrir laughed. Gleipnir quivered, its hum sharp, brittle. The wolf's voice rolled like thunder across the plains. You see it, don't you, one-handed God? Even now, he snares you. Even now, they whisper that you outweigh him. When the chain breaks, I will not need to drag Asgard into ruin. You will have already tipped the balance. The soil shook. The stars trembled. Gleipnir still held. On the wall, Tyr stood steady, cloak wrapped tight, sword beneath a single hand. His voice was low, steady, unbending. Then let me tip it. Better weigh truth heavy than to balance lies lightly. And the stars flickered, cold witnesses to a vow no chain could bind. There are questions meant to be answered, and there are questions meant to break the one who answers. Odin, wise as he was ruthless, knew the difference. And this time his test came wrapped in blood. 2 clans of Aesir warriors stood before the council, their armor still stained from battle, their hair matted with sweat and smoke. They smelled of iron, of fire, of broken shields. Their banners were torn, their voices hoarse from shouting oaths in the heat of war. Each swore that their oath was pure. Each claimed the other had broken faith. Each demanded that Tyr's word, once spoken, would sanctify them and damn their enemies. The hall was thick with tension. Even the torches seemed to burn lower, as if flame itself feared the weight of this moment. Odin leaned forward on his throne, Gungnir resting across his lap, his grip light but unshakable. His one eye burned storm-dark, unblinking, unmerciful. Choose, Tyr, he said. Name which oath stands and which falls. Unite Asgard by verdict. It was a trap, and every god knew it. To name one clan true was to brand the other false, and plant seeds of vengeance that would grow until Ragnarok itself. To call both false was to shame them all, to risk their loyalty unraveling before the council's eyes. To hesitate, even for a breath, was to falter and let silence crown suspicion. The hall held its breath. Tyr rose. His cloak, heavy with shadow, slid from his shoulders. His single hand rested on the carved table, scarred with the marks of centuries of rulings and disputes. His gaze was steady, his voice calm, as though he spoke not to gods but to eternity itself. An oath broken in blood is already false, he said, and his words cut sharper than any blade. Both clans fought. Both spilled blood while swearing the sanctity of their word. Both raised vows and shattered them in the same breath. Law does not bend for pride. Law does not crown deceit. Let both be stripped. Let neither claim purity. For a heartbeat, the chamber was silent, stunned, and then it erupted. Cries, curses, gasps, and laughter clashed louder than battle. One clan shouted in outrage, another in fury. Some gods nodded with grim approval. Others recoiled as if Tyr had struck them with his stump alone. The council's order fractured into chaos, voices echoing against gold and stone. At the throne, Odin's jaw tightened, though his face remained carved in granite calm. His voice cut through the storm like lightning. You shame our warriors before the hall. Tyr did not flinch. His voice was steady, his words unadorned, simple as truth. They shamed themselves when they broke their vows. I only named what already was. The silence that followed was sharper than steel. A silence so deep it pressed into bones of those gathered, forcing them to hear their own heartbeats, and question whether they still believed them steady. Loki, of course, could not let silence reign. His grin spread like fire crawling across dry grass. Ah, magnificent, he purred. He cuts both clans at once, leave the field empty, and yet stands taller than them all. Do you not see? Tyr does not divide Asgard. He replaces it. The words hissed like venom through the chamber. Thor growled, his patience cracking like thunder before rain. He surged his feet, Mjolnir rattling the very table as he struck it down. Enough! His voice boomed, shaking the rafters. But the whispers had already taken flight. They scattered from mouth to mouth, corner to corner, wing to wing. Loki's poison had taken root, far beyond the golden walls. On the plain where shadows stretched long, Fenrir strained against his bindings. Gleipnir glowed faintly in the moonlight, the impossible ribbon trembling under prophecy's weight. The wolf's laugh rolled through the dark, cruel and certain, carrying on winds that had learned long ago to fear him. Yes, one-handed God. Even now, you strip them all. Even now, you crown yourself in judgment. When chains snap, I will not need devour Asgard. They will throw it to me themselves, broken, bleeding, begging. The chain groaned. The soil trembled. Gleipnir's hum, one steady as a heartbeat of worlds, thinned into a sound more fragile than silence. That night, Tyr walked the wall alone, his cloak wrapped tight, his sword resting beneath his one good hand. The air was cold, heavy, the kind of night where breath felt like stone in the chest. He paused at the edge of the battlements, the plain stretching before him. Fenrir's shadow writhed in the distance, vast, patient, endless. The stars above flickered like distant judges, their cold fire unblinking. Tyr spoke quietly, his voice steady, his words carved into the wind as if they sought to outlast stone. Then let them call me crown. Let them call me traitor. Let them call me exile. I will still keep the vow, even if truth costs Asgard itself. The stars flickered, colder than any council, more faithful than any oath. They bore witness. They did not whisper. They did not waver. The wolf laughed again, a sound that cracked the air itself. And in Hlidskjalf, Odin's silence sharpened into steel. There are knots that cannot be untied. Odin, wise as he was weary, knew how to weave such tangles. And his next test was no quarrel of mortals, but a snare of gods themselves. Two Aesir stood before the council. Freyr, bright as summer sun, and Njord, heavy as a tide. Both swore the other had broken oath. Both demanded judgment. Freyr's voice was sharp. He promised tribute from the sea, yet holds it back. Njord's voice rolled deep. He promised offerings from the fields, yet withholds them. Each oath was knotted against the other. If Tyr named one true, the other must be false. If he called both false, he would shame them both. If he hesitated, he would betray his own steadiness. The hall waited. Odin leaned forward on his throne, his one eye storm-dark. Judge it, Tyr. Tyr rose. His cloak fell heavy. His single hand rested on the table. His voice was calm, carved from stone. Oaths that contradict cannot both stand. And yet both were sworn. To break either is to break both. The fault lies not in offering, but in pride. Let both gods share what was promised. Let the sea feed the land feed the sea. If they withhold again, strip them both. The chamber rippled, gasps, murmurs, divided voices. Odin's jaw tightened. You humiliate them both before the hall. Tyr's gaze did not waver. I name truth. They humiliated themselves when they let pride warp their oaths. The silence after was heavier than any chain. Loki, of course, could not resist. He clapped slowly, his grin wide. Oh, delicious! Two gods shame at once. The All-Father silenced, and the one-handed judge raised higher still. Tell me, do you not smell it? That is not justice, that is rule. Thor growled, his hammer sparking. He speaks only truth. Ah, Loki purred, and truth is a crown sharper than gold. On the plain, Fenrir laughed. Gleipnir groaned, trembling. His howl rolled across the 9 worlds. Yes, Tyr, even now, you strip gods, you shame them, you place yourself above them all. When chains break, you'll find no allies, only envy sharpened into knives, and my jaws waiting to close. The chain hummed thin, brittle. The soil shook. Gleipnir still held. That night, Tyr stood on the wall, sword under his hand. His voice was quiet, steady, spoken to the stars. Let them call it crown, call it treason, call it exile. I will still keep the vow, even if law cost me God themselves. The stars flickered, cold and unblinking. The wolf laughed, and Odin's silence sharpened into shadow. Warnings wear many shapes. Sometimes they come as thunder. Sometimes they come as silence. And sometimes, as Odin proved that day, they come as words spoken so quietly the whole hall bent to hear them. The council chamber was full, every bench crowded, every corner heavy with whispers, every torch flame bending low as though it, too, feared the weight of judgment about to fall. The air smelled of iron and pine resin, thick with the sweat of gods who pretended they did not sweat. Odin sat high upon the throne, his cloak drawn close like storm clouds gathered on a mountain top. Gungnir lay across his knees, humming faintly, a spear that had pierced both flesh and fate. His one eye burned storm-dark, not wild, not raging, but controlled, a storm contained, waiting for its chosen lightning strike. "Tyr," he said at last, voice low, steady, merciless. "You have judged mortals, judged warriors, judged even gods. Your verdict spread through the 9 worlds. They echo louder than mine. And now I will speak plain. You walk too close to treason." The words fell like spears, piercing air, wood, and bone alike. The hall froze. Not a chair creaked. Not a breath dared rise above the silence. Even Thor's jaw, firm as granite, tightened, his knuckles whitening on his cup. Even Loki's grin thinned, his laughter caught between his teeth, as though even mischief feared to move in the shadow of that accusation. Tyr rose slowly. His cloak slid from his shoulders, heavy as judgment itself. His single hand steadied against the table, scarred with meeting scarred flesh. His eyes did not burn with fire, nor tremble with fear. They held the stillness of mountains carved from the stone of necessity. "If truth is treason," he said, his voice low, iron-carved, "then call me traitor. Better exile in law than loyalty in lies." The words did not echo, they landed, solid, irrevocable, like nails hammered into the coffin of peace. Gasps rippled the benches. Some shouted approval, voices hot with hunger for justice. Others cursed his name, fury rising from their throats like smoke from battlefields. The hall was split in two, not by walls, not by spears, but by words alone. Odin's eye narrowed, the store within it folding tighter. His grip on Gungnir hardened. "You test my patience, one-handed god. Do not test my mercy." The silence after was heavier than Gleipnir itself, heavier than chains, heavier than prophecy, heavier than the 9 worlds straining to listen for the sound their own ending. Loki broke it, of course. His voice slipped through the cracks like oil on water. "Oh, exquisite," he cried, his grin flashing though it carried no mirth. "The All-Father threatens, the Judge defies, the hall divides. Tell me, does anyone else smell prophecy? Or is it just me?" But no one laughed, not even Loki. His jest withered in the stillness. His grin sagged into silence. And the council remained broken, not by swords, but by fear. That night, Fenrir roared. The sound rolled across the plain, a tremor that shook stone and bone alike. Gleipnir quivered, trembling so violently the soil split into cracks that bled dust into the sky. The hum of the chain, once steady as a lullaby, turned sharp, brittle, breaking. Stars above trembled. Some vanished behind thin clouds, as though they, too, feared to watch. "Yes, Tyr," the wolf howled, his voice a tide that reached even the highest halls. "Even now he names you traitor. Even now he casts you out. When I rise, you'll find no hall, no throne, no brother to shield you. Only my jaws and your silence breaking at last." The chain groaned, links glowing with a light born not of forge, but of prophecy. They strained, stretched, and for one heartbeat, it seemed they would snap. The sound of the world holding its breath pressed into every chest, gods, mortals, beasts alike. Then it held, just barely. But its song was thinner than ever, a thread where once there had been rope. On the wall, Tyr stood alone. His sword rested under his single hand. His cloak wrapped tight, though the night air was not cold enough to need it. His breath moved slow, deliberate, as though even air must be weighed before he allowed it to enter his chest. The plain stretched endless before him, but he did not look at the horizon. He looked at the shadow that writhed far below, the wolf that strained, the prophecy that pulsed with every groan of Gleipnir. His voice was quiet, steady, carved into the dark as though he meant the wind itself to carry it to the farthest star. "Then let me fall. Better truth break me than lies crown me. If the wolf must devour me, let him find me unbent." The words joined the night, heavier than arrows, sharper than blades. They did not silence the wolf, nothing could, but they cut through the roar enough to stand. The stars flickered overhead, distant, cold, unblinking witnesses. They bore no mercy, no malice. They simply recorded. The wolf laughed, his voice rolling thunder across the plain, mocking, certain. And in Hlitsjaf, Odin's silence deepened into warning, a warning more dangerous than any roar, for it carried patience, and patience in the hands of gods was sharper than steel. Thus ended Part 4 of Tyr's saga, the verdicts that split gods, the warnings of Odin, and the chains that sang near breaking. But you know, and I know, that warnings are not ends. They are beginnings. And Gleipnir's song would not last forever. Night has a way of keeping secrets, but Odin knew how to use it as a forge. When the halls of Asgard slept, when the mead benches were empty and the ravens alone kept watch, the All-Father moved, quietly, sharply, with purpose sharper than Gungnir's point. He summoned no council, no witnesses, only chosen warriors, the loyal, the unquestioning, the ones whose oaths bound tighter to the throne than the truth. To them, Odin whispered, the wolf strains, the judge divides. Watch Tyr, report him. If his law turns against Asgard, you will act. And so shadows fell on Tyr's steps. He felt them, heavy as eyes on his back, though none spoke. At the same time, Odin sent his ravens further, beyond Midgard, beyond Jotunheim, beyond seas and skies, searching for weapons, spells, anything that might break prophecy. They returned with fragments, half-secrets, hints, whispers of binding stronger than Gleipnir, of magics older than odes. Still, Odin's silence carried weight. He shared these with no one, not even Frigg. Meanwhile, Tyr carried on as he always had, judging mortals, weighing quarrels, walking the walls. His voice remained steady, his one hand firm, his presence unbending. Mortals whispered his name louder. Gods muttered envy sharper. But now, when Tyr entered the feast, benches quieted. When he stood in council, eyes narrowed. When he walked the streets of Asgard, whispers followed like shadows. Even Thor's loyalty grew taut. One evening he asked, low and heavy, "Brother, tell me plain, do you mean to take the throne?" Tyr's answer was simple, unshaken. "No, I mean only to keep the vow." Thor nodded, but doubt gnawed. Doubt always gnaws. And Fenrir laughed. His voice rolled from the plains, rattling Gleipnir until sparks leapt from the links. Yes, one-handed god. Even now he sends spies. Even now he gathers weapons. Even now he sharpens a haul against you. You're already cast out. When I rise, you'll have no throne to stand in, no counsel to shield you, no brother to defend you. Only me and the jaws that remember your hand. The chains shuddered. The soil split. Gleipnir held, but its hum was thin, brittle, desperate. On the wall, Tyr stood steady, his cloak wrapped tight, his sword beneath his single hand. His voice was quiet, steady, carried only to the stars. Then let him spy, let him doubt, let him strike. I will still keep the vow, even if truth cost me Asgard itself. The stars flickered, silent witnesses. The wolf laughed, and Odin's silence grew colder, sharper, deadlier. Trials can be louder than battles. Odin understood this well. Steel may cut flesh, but accusation cuts trust, and trust once broken does not heal. At council, the All-Father spoke with a calm so sharp it hurt. "There are whispers," he said, "whispers that Tyr judges not for truth, but for pride, that his law crowns him above the throne. We must test this. We must see if his scales hold Asgard or only himself." The chamber stiffened. No one dared breathe. Then Odin raised a trap. "A clan of mortals broke their oath to me, yet they claim they swore first to Tyr, and so their vow to him excuses their betrayal. Tell us, one-handed god, is their treachery forgiven because they spoke your name?" The hall leaned forward, waiting. The jaws of the question gleamed. Tyr rose, his cloak heavy, his one hand firm on the table. His voice was calm but iron-strong. "An oath to me does not erase an oath to you. To break either is to break both. Treachery cannot wear my name as shield. They stand guilty, no matter whose name they swore by." Gasps rippled the benches. Some nodded, relieved. Others frowned, unsatisfied. Odin's one eye narrowed. So, you admit mortals use your name against mine. Tyr's voice did not waver. Mortals misuse names. That is their weakness. But law does not bend to excuse it. A broken oath is broken, whether sworn by hand, crown, or spear. The silence that followed was sharper than steel. Loki's laugh broke it, sweet as poison. Oh, delicious! Do you see it? He clears himself, but still leave the crack. Mortals trust him more than the throne. Tell me, what is heavier, the spear the All-Father or the hand that mortals carve on bread? Thor growled, but said nothing. Heimdall's golden eyes glimmered like dawn, unreadable. The hall remained split. That night, Fenrir's laugh shook the plains. Gleipnir rattled, sparks leaping from its links. Yes, Tyr, even now he snares you. Even now he twists your words. Even now the gods doubt. You clear yourself, but suspicion clings. When the chain breaks, you will already be judged and found wanting. The soil cracked. The stars trembled. Gleipnir still held, but its song was frayed, brittle. On the wall, Tyr stood steady, cloak wrapped close, sword beneath his hand. His voice was quiet, steady, carried only to the stars. Then let them judge. Let them doubt. Let them twist. I will still keep the vow. Better suspicion in truth than loyalty in lies. The stars flickered, cold witnesses. The wolf laughed, and Odin's silence deepened into strategy. Dreams are softer than chains, but they bind deeper. And by now, Fenrir's whispers were no longer confined to shadows and winds. They had begun to bleed into the dreams of Asgard's strongest. Thor dreamed first. In his vision, Mjolnir struck, but shattered. The wolf's jaws closed, and Tyr stood beside him, not fighting, not fallen, but silent, watching. When Thor woke, sweat dampened his brow, and doubt gnawed at his chest. Brother, he muttered the next day, tell me plain, when the wolf rises, will you stand with us or apart? Tyr's gaze was calm, unflinching. I will stand with a vow. Thor wanted to believe. He needed to believe. But the dream clung sharper than faith. Others dreamed too. Freyr saw Tyr's scales weighing gods heavier than mortals. Jord saw the sea itself bending to his law. Even Heimdall, watcher of all, dreamed of Tyr standing taller than Odin, his one hand holding Asgard itself like a fragile toy. They woke shaken, uncertain, and whispers grew sharper. At council, Odin set the snare deeper. A band of mortals swore loyalty to Asgard, but broke it, stealing tribute for themselves. If we punish them, their kin will rebel. If we forgive them, law is mocked. Judge it, Tyr. The hall leaned in. The jaws gleamed. Tyr rose. His cloak fell heavy. His one hand rested on the table. His voice was calm, carved from stone. Forgiveness without penance is false. Punishment without measure is cruelty. Let them repay twice what they stole. Then let them kneel, not to me, not to you, but to the vow itself. The chamber rippled. Some nodded, others cursed. Odin's jaw tightened. You risk rebellion. Tyr's gaze did not waver. I risk only truth. If rebellion rises from justice, then rebellion was already in their hearts. The silence that followed was sharp as a drawn blade. Loki, of course, delighted. Ah, magnificent! Do you hear it? He crowns a vow above the throne. Mortals kneel not to Odin, not to Tyr, but to law itself. And who, I ask, is keeper of that law? Why? The one-handed god, of course. Murmurs spread like fire. On the plain, Fenrir's laugh rolled. Gleipnir rattled, sparks leaping. Yes, Tyr, even your verdicts crown you. Even your truths raise you higher. When chains snap, you'll not need my jaws. The gods will already call you wolf. The chain quivered. The soil shook. Gleipnir still held, but its hum was thin, desperate, fraying. That night, Tyr stood on the wall. His sword rested under his hand. His voice was quiet, steady, unbending. Let them call me wolf. Let them call me crown. I will still keep the vow, even if truth devours me first. The stars flickered, cold and watchful. The wolf laughed. And Odin's silence turned sharper than prophecy. Some trials are not meant to solve. They are meant to scar. Odin, master of foresight and traps, prepared such a wound for Tyr. At council, two families of mortals stood trembling, dragged before the throne. Each had sworn loyalty to Asgard. Each had broken that oath in different ways. One hoarded tribute, starving the villages around them. The other raised steel against their neighbors, claiming desperation. Both guilty, both pleading, both begging for Tyr's verdict. Odin's voice was calm, sharper than any blade. Judge them, Tyr. Name who shall stand and who shall fall. The hall froze. If Tyr named one guilty, the other would be crowned. If he named both guilty, Asgard would lose two clans at once. If he hesitated, his silence would be read as weakness. The jaws of prophecy gleamed. Tyr rose, his cloak heavy, his single hand steady on the table. His voice was calm, carved from iron. Both broke their vows. Both stand guilty. But law does not destroy for the sake of pride. Let the hoarders repay all they withheld, twice over, to the starving. Let the raiders lay down their steel, and serve and labor until their debt is paid. If either refuse, strip them both of name and honor. Justice binds not to crown, but to the vow itself. The chamber erupted. Some roared approval. Others shouted treason. Odin's eye darkened. You shame Asgard by softening law. Tyr's gaze did not waver. I sharpen it by binding it to truth. Punishment must heal, not only hurt. The silence after was heavier than Gleipnir. Loki, of course, fanned the fire. Oh, delicious! Do you hear it? He remakes law itself. Not Odin's will, not the throne's decree, but his own hand's measure. He does not bend Asgard to justice. He bends justice to Asgard. Tell me who rules now. Thor slammed the table, jaw tight. Enough! But even thunder could not drown the whispers. On the plain, Fenrir howled with laughter. Gleipnir rattled, sparks leaping. Yes, Tyr, even your mercy crowns you higher than Odin. Even your balance makes them envy. When the chain breaks, you will not need me to devour Asgard. They will already have torn themselves apart. The chain quivered. The soil shook. Gleipnir still held, but its song was breaking. That night, Tyr stood on the wall, his sword under his hand. His voice was quiet, steady, carved into the cold. Then let mercy crown me or strip me or betray me. I will still keep the vow. Better to bleed in justice than live in envy. The stars flickered. The wolf laughed. And Odin's silence turned sharper than steel. Warnings can weigh more than verdicts. When Odin finally gave his, it was not in whispers, not in shadows, but before the whole hall of Asgard. The feast was loud with mead and laughter, until Odin rose. The benches stilled. Ravens stirred. His one eye burned storm-dark. Tyr, he said, voice heavy, sharp, carrying across the chamber. You bind mortals with your scales. You shame gods with your judgments. You weigh even the throne itself. This cannot last. If you set law above crown, then you set yourself against me. Gasps split the hall. Some gods slammed fists in fury. Others sat frozen. The words fell like spears, impossible to dodge. All eyes turned. Tyr rose, his cloak heavy, his one hand steady on the table. His voice was calm, carved in stone. I did not stand against you. I stand with the vow. If crown departs from truth, then crown makes itself enemy, not me. The silence that followed was heavier than chains. Thor clenched his fists, torn between blood and law. Frigg's gaze filled with sorrow. Heimdall's golden eyes flickered like dawn. Loki grinned, delighted, his voice smooth as poison. Oh, exquisite! The All-Father calls him traitor. The judge calls him crownless, and Asgard splits with every word. Tell me, brothers and sisters, which saga will the skalds sing louder? Odin's threat or Tyr's vow? The hall broke into shouts. Some raised cups to Tyr. Others cursed his name. The divide was no longer whispers. It was war waiting for a spark. On the plain, Fenrir roared. Gleipnir screamed, its links glowing, trembling, nearly breaking. The soil split. The stars shook. Yes, one-handed God. Even now, he names you enemy. Even now, the hall divides. When chains snap, you will stand alone. No council, no throne, no brother. Only me, and the jaws that remember your hand. The chain stretched, sparks leaping. For one heartbeat, the links nearly split. Then Gleipnir held, but its hum was thin as glass, ready to shatter. That night, Tyr stood on the wall, his sword beneath his hand, his cloak heavy against the wind, his voice quiet, steady, unbending. Then let him name me enemy. Let them call me traitor. I will still keep the vow, even if it costs me Asgard itself. The stars flickered, the wolf laughed, and Odin's silence hardened into open threat. Thus ended Part 5 of Tyr's saga, the warning of Odin, the division of Asgard, and the chains of prophecy trembling near the breaking point. But you know, and I know, that warnings are not ends. They are invitations to storms. There are storms you can smell before they break. The air turns heavy. The sky lowers. Every bird hides. Asgard was for that storm now, and Tyr stood in its center. Odin no longer hid his hand. He summoned warriors loyal to the throne, not the law, and placed them near every council, every feast, every shrine. Their eyes never left Tyr. Their spears were always ready. And still, Odin's silence weighed heavier than commands. At council he spoke at last. From this day forward, no oath may be sworn by Tyr's name. Any vow that bears it will be void. Oaths belong to the throne, not to a hand that bleeds. The chamber gasped. Mortals' voices would not hear for weeks, but the gods heard it then. The All-Father himself forbidding the vow that mortals loved most. All eyes turned. Tyr rose. His cloak fell heavy. His one hand steady on the table. His voice was calm, cut from stone. You cannot unmake what mortals already speak. Their oaths are theirs. If they keep them, they stand. If they break them, they fall. Your decree does not erase truth. The silence cracked like lightning. Odin's jaw tightened. His eye burned storm dark. You defy me in open council. Tyr's gaze did not waver. I stand with the vow, not against you, unless you set yourself against it. The silence that followed was sharper than steel. Whispers spilled like fire through the feast hall. Some gods muttered that Tyr had spoken treason. Others swore he was the only one keeping Asgard whole. Cups clashed. Voices rose. Even thunder could not drown it. Loki, of course, delighted. Oh, how perfect! The All-Father bans his name. The judge defies him. The hall divides. Tell me, which side tastes sweeter, truth or throne? The divide deepened. On the plain, Fenrir roared. Gleipnir screamed under his strain. Sparks leapt from the links. Soil split. Stars trembled. Yes, Tyr, even now, he erases your name. Even now, he casts you out. When chains snap, you'll be outlawed, oathless, alone. Only I will remember you, and my jaws will close with joy. The chain groaned, thin as glass. Gleipnir still held, but prophecy's weight was pulling harder. That night, Tyr walked the wall, his cloak wrapped tight, his sword beneath his hand. His voice was low, steady, unbending. Let him forbid my name. Let them call me outlaw. I will still keep the vow. Better exile in truth than honor in lies. The stars flickered, cold and watchful. The wolf laughed, and Odin's silence sharpened into war. Decrees are only words until they are enforced, and Odin, once silent, now acted with the weight of thunder. The first shrines to fall were in Midgard. Warriors sworn to the All-Father stormed the hills, tearing down stones carved with Tyr's rune. Fires burned in the night, smoke rising like signals of exile. Mortals wept, but still whispered the vow. By Tyr, let me keep my word. Then came Asgard itself. Small wooden altars, carved in corners of the golden city, were smashed. Priests who honored Tyr were silenced. Songs that bore his name were hushed by threat of steel. But the whispers did not die. They only moved lower, softer, steadier. A vow does not vanish when silenced. It hides. It waits. At council, Odin's voice was colder than frost. Any who swear by Tyr's name will be punished. Any shrine raised again will be torn down. Asgard belongs to the throne, not to a hand already lost. The hall trembled. Tyr rose, his cloak heavy, his one hand steady on the table. His voice was calm but iron strong. You can break stone. You can burn wood, but you cannot unmake truth. Mortals will keep the vow, whether you forbid it or not. For oaths belong to the soul, not the spear. Gasps rippled the benches. Some gods nodded, fierce with agreement. Others hissed, furious. Odin's I burned. Then you stand outside my will. Tyr's answer was steady. If you will depart from law, then yes, I stand outside it. The silence that followed was heavier than Gleipnir. Loki's grin spread wide, sharp as knives. Oh, magnificent! Do you see it? The All-Father and the Judge no longer share a hall. The throne and the vow no longer share a crown. When this breaks, and it will, who will the Skalds call true? Whispers spread like fire. The divide grew deeper. On the plain, Fenrir howled with laughter. Gleipnir rattled, sparks leaping like fireflies. Yes, Tyr, even now he burns your shrines. Even now he forbids your name. And still they whisper you. Still they love you. When chains snap, I will rise into a world already broken, thanks to you. The chain groaned, thin as glass. The soil shook. The stars trembled. Gleipnir still held, but its hum was brittle, desperate. That night, Tyr walked the wall. His sword rested beneath his hand. His cloak wrapped tight. His voice was quiet, steady, carved into the wind. Let him burn my shrines. Let him erase my name. The vow is not stone. The vow is not wood. The vow is blood, and mine was already given. The stars flickered, cold witnesses. The wolf laughed, and Odin's silence hardened into steel. When rulers punish mortals, rebellion brews. But when rulers punish gods, prophecy quickens. Odin's decree sharpened. It was no longer mortals alone who suffered for whispering Tyr's name in marketplaces, at riversides, in temples where offerings burned. Now, even gods who dared to honor him felt the throne's cold weight fall upon their shoulders. One night, during a feast that should have been bright with laughter and mead, a young goddess rose. She was not bold by nature, but her devotion burned too brightly to be hidden. With trembling hands, she dared pour a cup in Tyr's stead, honoring the one-handed judge as though he himself sat beside her. Odin's gaze turned storm-dark. The torches dimmed as if shadows thickened at his command. The All-Father did not shout, did not strike. His voice was quieter than a blade drawn in silk, but its edge cut deeper than steel. Before the hall, he stripped her of her place at the table, casting her from the benches of Asgard until she renounced a vow. The chamber froze. Goblets stilled midway to lips. Meat turned to ash on tongues. Some gods lowered their eyes in silence, unwilling to meet the storm. Others clenched fists beneath the table, fury burning though bound by fear. But Tyr did not move. His cloak weighed heavy across his shoulders, his face carved in stillness. Only a single hand tightened on the table, steady, unbroken, a gesture so small yet louder than any protest. Whispers followed faster now, darting to the corridors like sparks before fire. The All-Father fears him. No, the All-Father protects us from him. No, the All-Father and the Judge are both wrong. Asgard itself will fall. The cracks widened. What once had been a murmur of discontent was now a chorus divided, each voice adding to the fracture in the golden walls. At council, Odin sharpened the trap. His voice was measured, but the storm behind it trembled like thunder chained too long. If gods themselves break my command, what say you, Tyr? Shall we forgive them or cast them out? The jaws of the test gleamed sharp. If Tyr chose mercy, he would defy Odin's decree. If he chose punishment, he would betray his own law. Either way, he would bleed. The chamber leaned forward as one body. Tyr rose. His cloak fell heavy against the stone floor, the sound of fabric louder than drums. His one hand rested on the table. His gaze was steady, his voice iron set in stone. An oath is not erased by decree. If a god speaks it, the vow stands. To punish for keeping truth is to shame Asgard itself. If you cast him out, Then let me stand with them. Gasps split the hall like shattered shields. Some gods nodded fiercely, their eyes lit with defiance. Others snarled, voices rising, demanding order, demanding obedience, demanding that Tyr bow as they themselves fear to bow. Odin's one eye burned storm-dark, a tempest gathering, contained yet seething. Then you defy me openly. Tyr's answer was simple, steady, cold as law itself. I defy only lies. The silence that followed was heavier than Gleipnir, heavy enough to shake thrones, heavy enough to bend prophecy closer. Loki leaned back, his grin sharp as broken glass, his voice coiled like smoke, impossible to ignore. Oh, exquisite! He dares the All-Father before every god. He crowns himself not in gold, but in truth. And truth, my friends, weighs heavier than spears. The chamber shook with whispers, some in awe, some in fury, some in fear. The split was no longer rumor. It was war, waiting only for a name. On the plain, Fenrir's laugh rolled like thunder set free from mountains. Gleipnir rattled under the strain, sparks spraying like stars torn loose from the firmament. Yes, Tyr, the wolf howled, his voice ripping across the night. Even now you stand against him. Even now you claim to cast out. When chains snap, you'll find yourself among them, exiled, betrayed, abandoned. And I will be waiting. The chain screamed, its hum thinning into a note sharp as breaking glass. The soil trembled beneath Asgard's walls, stones quaking as though they feared their own foundations. Gleipnir still held, but prophecy's jaws were already closing. That night, Tyr walked the wall. Alone, always alone. His sword rested under his single hand, his cloak wrapped tight against winds colder than they should have been. His gaze was fixed not on the feast behind him, not on the quarrels in the council, but on the vast plain where the wolf strained. His voice, quiet, steady, was carved into the dark, meant not for gods, not for Odin, not even for Fenrir, but for the stars themselves. Then let me stand with the cast out. Better exile in truth than seed in lies. I lost one hand for a vow. I can lose Asgard too. The words drifted upward, met by the cold light of constellations that did not judge, did not whisper, did not falter. The stars flickered, faint, constant witnesses to a war yet unnamed. The wolf laughed again, his voice carrying the promise of jaws wide enough to swallow gods. And in Hlidskjalf, Odin's silence thickened. No longer the silence of patience, not yet the silence of war, but the silence of a shadow stretching across Asgard, heavy enough to break golden halls, heavy enough to bring the end closer with every heartbeat. Thus ended another turn in Tyr's saga. The cast-outs who found in him a defender, the throne that found in him defiance, the wolf who found in him inevitability. But you know and I know that defiance is not an end. It is a spark, and sparks, when scattered across halls, build a pride and prophecy, burn faster than chains can hold. Exile begins not with banishment, but with silence. When a seat grows colder, when a name is spoken less, when a place at the table is left empty longer than it should, exile has already begun. Odin did not announce it openly. He did not need to. His decrees were not always carved in stone or thunder from Hlidskjalf. Sometimes they were stitched into the quiet, slipped into the order of things, until the order itself became a weapon. At council, Tyr's seat was moved lower down the hall, farther from the throne, closer to the doors where servants entered and left. It was no longer beside Thor or Heimdall, but among minor voices, distant from the heart of decision. At feasts, his cup was filled later than the others. Where once mead came to him first, as honor to the judge whose hand had been lost for Asgard's safety. Now it came last, the foam thin, the sweetness gone. When the high matters of war were discussed, borders tested, giants stirring, omens red in blood and fire. Odin's voice rang out for Thor, for Heimdall, for Freyr. Never for Tyr. His silence in those councils weighed more than any words he could have spoken. The hall noticed. Whispers spread, carried on the air like sparks in dry grass. See how the All-Father casts him aside. See how Tyr still comes, silent, steady, though he is shamed. Perhaps that is strength, or perhaps it is pride refusing to bow. And so the divide widened not only in halls and feasts, but in the hearts of gods themselves. At last, Odin made his move plain. His voice was calm, yet sharper than steel, spoken not in fury but in finality. Tyr will no longer judge and counsel. His words divide more than they bind. Let his voice fall silent until the wolf is slain and prophecy ends. Gasps rang through the hall. Goblets slipped from hands. Some gods looked away, unable to meet Tyr's gaze, ashamed of their silence. Others nodded grimly. Relief etched on their faces, as though glad the weight of judgment had finally shifted from them. Tyr rose. His cloak fell heavy against the floor, the sound louder than war horns in the hush of that hall. His one hand rested firm on the table. His voice, calm, steady, unbending, filled the silence. If law has no voice, then Asgard is already broken. You may silence me here, All-Father, but mortals will still whisper my name. Truth will still walk, even if cast from the hall. The words struck deeper than spears. They did not end in echo, they ended in silence. A silence heavier than Gleipnir itself. Odin's one eye burned storm-dark, cold with decision. Then walk, Tyr, walk your silence. And Tyr did. He turned without haste, without bowing, his cloak trailing behind him like the last remnant of dignity in a hall that had traded justice for obedience. Loki's laughter slithered after him, sharp and delighted. "Oh, how sweet!" the trickster cried. The judge cast from the hall, the All-Father clutching silence like a crown. Tell me, which saga tastes sweeter, the exile or the throne that feared him? No one answered, but whispers answered in their stead. They spread faster than fire, filling every chamber, every feast, every corridor of gold. And fire, once lit, does not ask permission to burn. On the plain, Fenrir roared with laughter. The sound shook mountains, rattled roots, sent crows screaming from the trees. Gleipnir shrieked under his thrashing, sparks flying like shattered stars torn loose from the firmament. "Yes, Tyr," the wolf howled, his voice rolling across the dark. "Even now he casts you out. Even now you walk alone. When chains snap, you will have no hall, no counsel, no shield. Only me and the jaws that have waited since your hand." The chain groaned, thin as glass under strain. The soil split into jagged wounds. Stones shifted, crying out in protest. Gleipnir still held, but its hum was breaking, its song thinning, its strength becoming prophecy instead of bond. That night, Tyr stood on the outer wall, beyond the glow of Asgard halls. He no longer lingered in the warmth of feasts, nor waited for summons and counsel. His path led outward, to the silence of stone, to the wind that carried no whispers but its own. His sword rested beneath his one good hand. His cloak hung heavy, weighted not with gold but with solitude. His gaze stretched over the plains, where the wolf ried, where prophecy pulsed with every heartbeat a chain. His voice was quiet, steady, carved into the wind, not for gods, not for Odin, not for Fenrir, but for the stars, who alone listen without judgment. Then let me walk silence. Let me walk exile. I lost my hand for the vow. I can lose my seat too. Better silence in truth than speech in lies. The stars flickered, cold witnesses to vows no throne could silence. The wolf laughed, his roar rolling thunder across the night, mocking, certain. And in Hlidskjalf, Odin's silence hardened. No longer patience, no longer warning. It had become banishment, sharpened into the edge of fate itself. Thus began Tyr's exile, not with proclamation, but with silence, not with banners torn down, but with a seat grown cold, not with war, not yet, but with the shadow of it stretching across Asgard's golden walls. And you know, and I know, that silence never holds. It breaks, and when it breaks, it does so louder than thunder. Exile is not a single step. It is a path that lengthens with each silence, each missing place, each door closed more quickly than before. By the time Tyr's feet carried him beyond the council, the path was already long. The next feast told the truth plain. His seat was gone. Not empty, gone. The benches shifted to erase the space he had once filled. The cups were fewer, the dishes redistributed, the memory of his place cut out with surgical precision, as if the one-handed god had never sat among them. as if he had never raised his cup beside Thor, or spoken a verdict that steadied 9 worlds. The absence was more violent than presence. An empty chair might have honored silence. But no chair at all? That was erasure. Whispers filled the hall, softer than the clink of goblets, sharper than knives hidden beneath cloaks. Some muttered relief. At last, the All-Father has ended the division. Others muttered shame. We feasted with him, we swore by his hand, and now we eat as though he never was. But none raised their voice, not against the All-Father's decree. Odin drank in silence, his one eye storm-dark, unreadable. His hand never strayed from Gungnir. He did not look toward Tyr. Not once. Perhaps that was the cruelest part. Not anger, not fire, but erasure colder than stone. Yet mortals, ever stubborn, did not silence so easily. Shrines broken by decree were built again, hidden deeper, their altars tucked behind barns, under floorboards, beneath river stones. Oaths forbidden by Asgard were sworn still, whispered over bread, over soil, over the birth of children who would never see Valhalla, but still carried Tyr's name like a flame. And Tyr's name, though outlawed in halls of gold, spread wider than before, carried not by priests or skalds, but by farmers who tilled in silence, by sailors who whispered into storms, by children who repeated their parents' secret prayers. Where gods turn away, mortals turn closer, and that, more than Odin's decree or the wolf's roar, planted seeds that could not be dug out. Loki, of course, feasted on the storm. "Oh, how divine!" he cried between cups, his laughter slicing the air though none joined him. The judge cast out, the throne trembling, the wolf laughing. Do you not smell it? That is prophecy simmering, ready to boil. And when it spills, oh, the taste will be glorious. But no one laughed, not even Loki. His smile lingered, but it was thinner than usual, as though even trickery feared to play too loud, while chains trembled. On the plain, Fenrir strained harder than ever. His muscles rippled, vast as mountains in quake. Gleipnir screamed, a high, piercing sound that made the stars themselves flicker like lamps shaken in storm. Sparks leapt from its links. Each flashed like a piece of starlight torn free. The soil split wide, roots shuddering, rivers trembling, the very earth groaning under prophecy's weight. "Yes, Tyr," the wolf roared, his voice so vast that even the feasting hall quivered though its doors were barred. "Even now he erases you. Even now he casts you out. When I rise, you will have no hall to defend, no brothers to stand beside, no throne to guard. Only me, and my jaws closing where your hand once was." For one terrible moment, the chain nearly split. Its song turned thin, brittle, cracking like ice over deep water. The whole world seemed to lean toward the sound, waiting for the snap. Then it held, but weaker, fainter, closer to breaking than ever before. That night, Tyr stood on the furthest wall, where Asgard glow faded into shadow, and the plains stretched endless. The night air smelled of iron, of smoke, of storms not yet broken. His sword rested beneath his hand, his cloak wrapped tight against winds colder than prophecy alone could explain. His gaze was fixed not on the wolf, not on Asgard, but on the horizon itself, as though searching for a truth beyond gods, beyond chains, beyond fate. His voice was quiet, steady, carried into the endless night, carved into wind that cared nothing for thrones. Then let me walk exile. Let me lose halls, shrines, names. I lost my hand for the vow. I can lose Asgard too. Better fall alone in truth than stand crowned in lies. The words did not echo. They settled, heavy, into stone and star alike. The plain swallowed them, but the stars caught them, cold witnesses who hold them longer than any counsel could. The wolf laughed, his roar shaking the very marrow of the night, mocking, certain. And in Hlidskjalf, Odin's silence hardened into exile complete. Thus ended Part 6 of Tyr's saga, the casting out of the judge, the trembling of Gleipnir, and the vow that still would not bend. But you know and I know that exile is not an ending. It is a beginning, and the chain could not sing forever. Exile can be heavy, but it can also be sharp. For Tyr, it was both, weight pressing on his shoulders and blade cutting him from every hall he once called his own. He walked Asgard streets as a stranger. Children who once played at his feet were pulled away by anxious mothers. Warriors who once sought his judgment turned their faces aside. Even priests who once whispered his name now crossed the street, fearing Odin's wrath more than Tyr's truth. Yet mortals beyond Asgard did not falter. Farmers still swore his vow at sunrise. Sailors still traced his rune before casting nets. And when shrines were burned, they built them again, deeper, hidden beneath soil and stone. The vow lived, not on the golden benches, but in the rough hands of the forgotten. One evening, Thor found him walking the outer wall. The god of thunder stood heavy, his jaw tight, his voice low. "Brother," he said, "you walk apart now. But still I ask, when the wolf rises, will you stand with us? Or will exile keep you from the field?" Tyr's gaze did not waver. His voice was calm, steady. "I will stand with the vow. And if the vow calls me to the field, then yes, I will stand beside you." Thor's breath eased, but not fully. Doubt still gnawed. Dreams of Fenrir's jaws still clung. Loki, of course, slithered close, his grin wide, his tone mocking. Oh, how noble! The one-handed god walks exile, yet still swears he will fight. "Tell me, Tyr, when the wolf's jaws close, will you fight him or will you feed him? After all, you've already given him one hand." Thor growled, but Tyr did not turn. His silence was sharper than any reply. On the plain, Fenrir laughed louder than ever. Gleipnir rattled, sparks flying like shattered stars. The soil split wide, mountains shivered, roots trembled. Yes, Tyr, even now they doubt you. Even now they mock you. When chains snap, you'll have no hall, no throne, no crown. Only exile, only silence. And I will devour that silence first. The chain screamed, its hum thin, brittle, desperate. For one heartbeat, the links nearly shattered. Then Gleipnir held, but prophecy's jaws were closing fast. That night, Tyr stood on the wall, the farthest point of Asgard's light, his sword beneath his hand, his cloak wrapped tight. His voice was quiet, steady, carried into the cold night. Then let them doubt, let them mock, let them turn away. I will still keep the vow, even if truth leaves me the last god standing. The stars flickered, cold witnesses. The wolf laughed, and Odin's silence deepened into strategy darker than exile. Exile may strip a seat, but it cannot strip a story. And Tyr's name, though forbidden in Asgard, grew taller in the mouths of mortals. In Midgard, skalds whispered of the one-handed god who had given his hand to bind the wolf, not for glory, not for crown, but for a vow. They sang in low tones, around fires that hissed in the dark, telling the god who spoke truth even when thrones turned against him. Farmers carved his rune in hidden places, on the beams of barns, on the underside of plows, on the stones that marked the edges of their fields. Sailors scratched into the mass of ships, trusting that justice itself would hold their sails steady against storms. Mothers bent to their children and whispered a lesson older than gold. A vow is a vow, even if it costs you everything. The All-Father's decree spread wide, forbidding his name. But the more it was forbidden, the more it grew. What Odin tried to erase became a fire that burned brighter in secret. A flame passed hand to hand, heart to heart, far from golden halls. Odin knew this. He felt it in every raven's report, each returning bird heavier than when it left. He heard it in every whisper from the worlds below, in every dream that slipped into his sleep unbidden. Mortals spoke Tyr's name, and silence could not erase it. So, in silence sharper than thunder, he turned his one eye outward. He summoned Thor, Heimdall, and the Valkyries. His voice was iron, cold as winter steel. The wolf strains. The chain thins. Ragnarok comes nearer. We will prepare armies, forge weapons, and gather allies. We will not wait for prophecy to strike. We will meet it with iron before it comes. The gods nodded, armor glinting in torchlight, hands resting on blades. But none spoke Tyr's name. His absence weighed heavier than presence, pressing into every pause, into every silence between orders. Meanwhile, Tyr himself walked among mortals in disguise. His cloak was plain, without the shimmer of divine weave. his face shadowed, his one hand hidden deep within folds of cloth. He moved like any wanderer, yet carried the steadiness of mountains. He judged disputes in villages where families fought over rivers and inheritance. He settled quarrels in marketplaces where merchants shouted of coin and theft. He blessed oaths whispered in the dark, when men and women swore by their lives and feared their words might break. Mortals did not know him, not fully, but in their bones they did, for his voice was steady, carved from truth, and truth, once heard, is never mistaken. Whispers spread further, carried by tongues eager to name what thrones forbade. A wanderer walks among us. He judges fair. He takes no coin. His word is iron. Exile was turning him into myth. Loki, of course, tasted the storm with delight. "Oh, how divine!" he sang to whoever would listen, and many listened, even those who cursed him after. The judge cast out, yet worshipped louder. The All-Father prepares for war, but his silence only sharpens prophecy. Tell me, when the chain breaks, whose name will the mortals cry? Odin or Tyr? No one answered. The question itself was poison, dripping into ears, spreading through silence, a wound that could not heal. On the plain, Fenrir roared. The sound was so vast it cracked the air itself. Gleipnir rattled, its impossible threads glowing as sparks sprayed like shattered suns. The soil split wider, rivers buckled, roots tore from the earth, and the stars above trembled like lamps in storm. "Yes, Tyr," the wolf roared, his laughter rolling with fire and ruin. "Even now he raises armies. Even now he gathers steel. But mortals whisper your name, not his. When I rise, their love will not shield you. It will only crown you king of ashes, and I will devour crown and vow alike." The chain screamed, thinner than ever, its song brittle as glass cracking in frost. Gleipnir held, but only just. Its hum was no longer steady. It was the cry of prophecy stretching too far. That night, Tyr stood beyond Asgard's glow, on walls no longer his to guard. His sword rested beneath his one hand, his cloak wrapped tight against winds colder than mortal breath. His gaze was fixed not on Asgard's lights behind him, nor the wolf's shadow before him, but on the endless dark that stretched between. His voice, quiet, steady, carved into the night. "Let him raise armies. Let him forge weapons. Let him banish my name. I will still keep the vow, even if truth leaves me forgotten in halls, remembered only in whispers." The stars flickered, cold witnesses who did not bend to thrones or chains. The wolf laughed, his voice tearing across the horizon, certain as hunger. And in Hlidskjalf, Odin's silence deepened into warcraft. Thus ended Part 7 of Tyr's saga, the outlawed name that grew brighter in secret, the All-Father sharpening war, the wolf tightening prophecy, and the judge walking exile yet unbent. But you know, and I know, that war and prophecy walk hand in hand. And Gleipnir's trembling could not last forever. There are battles fought with swords, and there are battles fought with silence, whispers, and waiting. Odin chose the latter, but the world still shook as if steel had clashed. The All-Father's command spread like fire hidden under snow. Quiet first, but impossible to contain once it burned through. In the skies, Valkyries drilled armies, their wings cutting the air like spears of light. Shields clashed in patterns older than memory, their voices crying war songs that made the very clouds tremble. Thor thundered across Midgard, storms raging in his wake. He gathered warriors to the banner of Asgard, mortals who believed their names might yet echo in Valhalla. To them, Thor spoke of honor, of prophecy, of a war that would decide not just gods, but all living things. In Svartalfheim, dwarves were summoned from their forges. Sparks showered like meteors as they struck their anvils, shaping weapons meant to pierce prophecy itself. Blades tempered in curses, armor hammered from ores stolen from beneath dying stars. Every hammer strike echoed louder than thunder, reverberating to the roots of Yggdrasil. And yet, every echo carried Tyr's absence. It was a silence so sharp it cut through iron and song alike. A silence that whispered, "The judge is gone." The vow has no voice in these councils. The armies march, but truth does not march with them. Among mortals, the story grew brighter. They spoke of the wanderer with one hand, the god who had lost but not bent, who judged fairly, who took no bribes, who gave no threats. In taverns, in fields, in ships adrift on storm-racked seas, his story carried like wind. Children carved his rune into bark, laughing though they did not know the way of their play. Sailors whispered it before storms, their voices trembling as they asked for a justice no wave could drown. Lovers swore in secret, believing a vow sealed in Tyr's name will hold firmer than iron bands. The vow lived not in Asgard's gold, but in dirt, in sea, in blood, in the hidden places where thrones could not reach. And for every shrine burned in Odin's decree, 2 more rose in shadow, guarded by silence, lit by unseen hands. Exile had not erased Tyr. It had multiplied him. At the next feast, Odin raised his voice. It rolled heavy with warning, thick as thunderclouds. The wolf strains. The chain weakens. Ragnarok nears. We will stand united or fall divided. Any who honor Tyr stand divided. Choose your crown wisely. The hall stiffened. Golden light flickered on the faces of gods who dared not meet one another's eyes. Some raised their cups to Odin with forced fervor, their voices hollow as they cried his name. Others lowered their eyes into silence, unwilling to drink, unwilling to betray, yet too fearful to resist. None dare raise a cup to Tyr, not in the open, not where Odin's one eye swept, storm-dark and merciless. But whispers still flowed beneath the surface, quiet as roots beneath soil, steady, hidden, unbroken. Loki grinned, sharp and merciless, his voice sweet as poison poured into wine. "Oh, exquisite," he sang, spreading his hands as though conducting the tension itself. The All-Father sharpens spears, mortals whisper vows, and the judge walks exile like a crown. Tell me, when the wolf breaks free, whose side will shatter first? The thrones or the vows? His words slithered across the benches. Some gods stiffened, others swallowed hard. No one answered. The question itself was poison, and to speak was to drink it. The silence that followed was sharper than blades. On the plain, Fenrir howled. The sound cracked the night, open like glass. Gleipnir rattled so violently the ground split into veins of fire. Mountains shivered, roots groaned, and stars flickered above as though the wolf's breath could dim their ancient light. "Yes, Tyr," the beast roared, his voice a tide of certainty. "Even now armies rise. Even now shrines burn. Even now whispers crown you higher than Odin. When I rise, you will stand between throne and prophecy, and both will crush you before my jaws do." The chain screamed. Gleipnir's song, once steady as a heartbeat, grew brittle, threadbare. For one terrible moment, it seemed to snap. Every god in Asgard, every mortal in Midgard, every star above felt the world lean into that silence. And then it held. Barely, but its hum was fading, thin as frost on a morning sun. That night, Tyr walked alone, far beyond the feasts and fires of Asgard. He walked the edge of exile, where walls ended and wilderness began. The glow of the golden hall was faint behind him. The vast plain stretched before him, the wolf's laughter rolling like thunder between them. His sword rested beneath his one good hand, his cloak wrapped tight, though the cold he felt was not of wind, but of distance. His shadow stretched long, thin, nearly swallowed by night. His voice was quiet, steady, carved into the dark as though the stars themselves must carry it. Then let armies rise. Let whispers crown me. Let prophecy sharpen its teeth. I will still keep the vow, even if it leaves me crushed between wolf and throne. The word sank into the soil, into stone, into sky. The stars flickered, cold witnesses, older than thrones, older than chains. They bore no judgment, but they bore memory, and memory is heavier than silence. The wolf laughed, a roar that split mountains, mocking, certain. And in Hlidskjalf, Odin's silence turned into storm. The kind of storm that does not strike yet, but gathers, coils, waits for the moment when patience ends and thunder claims the sky. Thus ended Part 8 of Tyr's saga. The armies raised in fear, the shrines raised in shadow, the wolf shaking the roots of the world, and the judge walking exile yet unbroken. But you know, and I know, that storms do not gather to remain still. They break, and when they break, no chain, no vow, no throne can remain untouched. Unity forged in fear is brittle. Odin, though wise, leaned on it still. His alliances were hammered not by trust, but by threat, and the cracks already showed. The All-Father summoned the Vanir. His voice carried across seas and valleys, demanding ships and tribute. The call itself rang like iron, and the Vanir came, but not gladly. Njord bowed, his sea-born cloak brushing the floor of the hall. Yet bitterness weighed heavy in the bend of his spine. He remembered the old war between Aesir and Vanir, remembered how truce had been hammered out not by honor, but by necessity. His oath felt more chain than choice. Freyr nodded, his face calm, but his jaw clenched so tightly it seemed his teeth might shatter. The god of peace and plenty, sworn now to a throne that silenced one of its own. His silence was not agreement. It was a storm unspoken. Even Freya, bright with beauty and warcraft, lowered her gaze only halfway. Her eyes glimmered with secrets unshared. Her lips pressed into a line that spoke of fury disguised as grace. Whispers stirred among them. Why follow a crown that silences truth? Why kneel when the exile's vow spreads louder than decrees? But none dared speak it aloud. Not yet. The dwarves, too, grumbled in their forges. Their hammers rose and fell, sparks showering like small suns, steel ringing louder than prophecy itself. But their mutters filled the smoke. We forge as weapons, they said, hands blackened with soot. But whose name do mortals whisper now? Not Odin's. Tyr's. Every strike, every blade, every shield rang with the exile's shadow. They might forge for Odin, but their hearts carried the name the throne had tried to erase. And that name haunted every strike like an echo. Among mortals, shrines multiplied faster than flames could burn them. A statue torn down in daylight was raised again in the dark. An altar smashed was rebuilt with hidden stones. They swore by Tyr in whispers, in shadows, in huts where candles flickered low, in fields where the soil itself seemed to remember oaths. What had been outlawed became sacred. What had been silenced became louder than ever. And though Tyr walked among them in disguise, never naming himself, they felt it. His voice steady, his hand firm, his presence unbending. The wanderer judged disputes, blessed vows, and carried the weight of law on shoulders stripped of crown. Exile was not erasing him. Exile was turning him into something Odin could not touch. Legend. At council, Odin's voice was sharp as spear point. All who honor Tyr dishonor Asgard. If mortals build his shrines, we will tear them down. If gods whisper his vow, we will cast them out. There is no crown but the throne. There is no vow but mine. The chamber trembled under the force of his words. Thor's fists clenched at his sides, knuckles pale as he wore with loyalty and truth. Heimdall's eyes burned gold, unblinking, seeing more than he dared to speak. Frigg's face tightened with grief, her silence not consent but sorrow. None dared speak. But silence itself spoke louder. It echoed in the cracks of the council, in the breaths withheld, in the eyes that turned away. Loki, of course, broke it. "Oh, how perfect!" he cried, his grin sharp as broken glass, his words dripping venom and delight in equal measure. The throne gathers allies with fear. The vow gathers mortals with whispers. The wolf laughs. The chain breaks. Tell me, All-Father, when the jaws close, which will snap first, throne, vow, or crown? His question slithered into the silence. No one answered. To answer was to drink poison. To stay silent was to feel it burning in their throats. The silence after was sharper than blades. On the plain, Fenrir roared. The sound split the horizon. Gleipnir rattled so fiercely the sky itself cracked with thunder. Stars flickered as if shaken loose from the firmament. Mountains trembled as though bracing for collapse. "Yes, Tyr," the wolf thundered, his laughter a storm of teeth. "Even now, he gathers allies with steel. Even now, he silences your name with fire. But mortals still whisper you. Gods still watch you. When I rise, you will stand between crown and chain, and both will break you before my jaws do." The chain screamed, its song unraveling into frayed notes, brittle as glass, thin as spider's silken storm. Gleipnir still held impossibly, but prophecy was no longer waiting. It was arriving. That night, Tyr stood at the farthest edge of exile, where Asgard's glow was no more than a faint ember in the distance. The wind was sharp, carrying with it the smell of iron and storm. His sword rested beneath his one hand, his cloak wrapped tight around shoulders more burdened than armored. He gazed into the endless dark, neither toward Odin's hall nor Fenrir's shadow, but into the space between them, the space where his Val lived. His voice was quiet, steady, carved into the night like runes on stone. Then let him gather allies. Let him burn my name. Let mortals whisper me in shadows. I will still keep the vow, even if truth leaves me crushed between prophecy and throne. The word sank into the soil, into the sky, into memory of stars that did not speak yet never forgot. The stars flickered, cold witnesses to its older than crowns. The wolf laughed, a roar that cracked the heavens, certain, cruel. And in Hlidskjalf, Odin's silence sharpened into final reckoning. The silence of storms gathering, the silence before steel, the silence that meant war would come not in whispers, but in fire. Thus ended Part 9 of Tyr's saga. The brittle unity of fear, the shrines rising in shadow, the wolf straining prophecy closer, and the judge, unbent, walking exile into legend. But you know, and I know, that reckoning waits for no throne. And when prophecy arrives, silence is the first thing it devours. Fear, once hidden, eventually steps into the open, and Odin, who had ruled with foresight and silence, at last let fear show in the fire of his voice. The hall was heavy with mead and shadows when he rose. His one eye burned storm-dark. His hand gripped Gungnir like thunder leashed. "Hear me, all gods of Asgard," he said. "The wolf strains. The chain weakens. Ragnarok nears. And still, mortals whisper the name of Tyr. Still, shrines rise in secret. Still, oaths defy the throne. From this day, any who speak his vow are traitors. Any who honor his rune are exiles. I will not share crown with silence, nor throne with treason." The words fell like spears. Some gods shouted in fury. Others bowed their heads in silence. The hall split, not in whispers now, but in open cries. All eyes turned, but Tyr was not there. His seat was gone, his place erased. He walked exile beyond the walls. And still, his absence filled the chamber heavier than presence. Among mortals, the decree spread. Some hid shrines deeper. Some swore louder, daring the wrath of Asgard itself. And some cursed Odin's name in the same breath. They whispered tears. Exile had not ended his story. It had made it unbreakable. Loki laughed sharp, his grin wide as knives. Oh, exquisite. The All-Father shows fear. The vow shows fire. The wolf shows teeth. Do you not see it? This is no throne. This is a battlefield. And when the jaws close, prophecy will not choose crown or exile. It will choose ruin. The silence that followed was heavier than Gleipnir. On the plain, Fenrir roared. His body strained, his muscles coiled, his jaws snapped at the air. Gleipnir shrieked, sparks exploding, soil ripping wide, stars trembling as if ready to fall. Yes, Tyr, even now he names you traitor. Even now he burns your vow. When I rise, you'll have no hall, no ally, no throne. Only me, and the jaws that have waited since your hand. The chain screamed brittle as glass. For one heartbeat, a single link split, glowing, cracking. The sound rolled across the 9 worlds like thunder. But then, barely Gleipnir held. Its hum was faint now, fainter than breath, fainter than hope. That night, Tyr stood on the farthest wall of exile, his sword beneath his hand, his cloak wrapped tight. His voice was quiet, steady, carved into the dark. Then let him name me traitor. Let him burn my vow. Let prophecy sharpen its teeth. I will still keep the vow, even if it leaves me alone at the end of all things. The stars flickered, cold witnesses. The wolf laughed, and Odin's silence turned into the shadow of war. Thus ended Part 7 of Tyr's saga. The open fear of Odin, the outlawing of Tyr's vow, and Gleipnir's scream echoing across the 9 worlds. But you know and I know that fear is not an ending. It is a summons. And prophecy was already walking toward them. There comes a moment when silence no longer shields, when even shadows cannot hide what is coming. Asgard had reached that moment. Odin no longer whispered his warcraft. He moved armies across the Bifrost in daylight, their shields flashing like rivers of fire. Valkyries flew higher, drilling formations above the golden halls. Dwarves hammered deep, their forges roaring with weapons meant not for mortals, but for prophecy itself. The air of Asgard trembled with readiness. Yet readiness is not the same as certainty. Thor stood near his father, jaw tight, hammer heavy in his hand. His loyalty was fierce, but doubt gnawed like wolves at his chest. In his dreams he still saw Tyr, silent at the edge of the field, watching as Fenrir's jaws closed. And when Thor woke, sweat cold on his brow, he wondered if prophecy laughed at him too. Among mortals, whispers became fire. Shrines outlawed were raised bolder. Songs forbidden were sung louder. Children carved Tyr's rune not in secret, but in open fields. Farmers prayed by his name with voices steady, daring Asgard's wrath. Exile had turned the one-handed god into something greater than outlaw. He was becoming the vow itself. At council, Odin's words were thunder. The wolf strains. The chain weakens. Ragnarok nears. We will not wait for jaws to close. We will strike first, with every spear, every shield, every flame. We will crush prophecy before it breathes. Some gods roared their assent. Others lowered eyes in silence. But all felt the weight of Tyr's absence. Loki's grin split the chamber. Oh, magnificent! Do you hear it? The All-Father plans to strike prophecy itself. He would kill fate with spears, silence destiny with hammers. Tell me, brothers and sisters, when did even Odin grow so afraid? No one answered, but the silence itself was poison. On the plain, Fenrir strained harder than ever. Gleipnir rattled, sparks flying like shattered suns. The soil split wide, roots quaked, stars flickered like dying lamps. Yes, Tyr, the wolf howled. Even now he marches armies. Even now he forges weapons. Even now he fears you more than me. When chains snap, I will devour crown and exile alike, and you will taste the ruin first. The chain screamed, thin as glass, brittle, breaking. Gleipnir still held, but barely. That night, Tyr stood far beyond Asgard's glow, his sword beneath his hand, his cloak wrapped tight. His voice was quiet, steady, carved into the endless dark. Then let him march, let him forge, let him fear. I will still keep the vow, even if prophecy calls it a first of all. The stars flickered, cold witnesses. The wolf laughed, and Odin's silence became war itself. War spreads like fire. Once loosed, it runs where it wills. Odin loosed it now, and the sparks fell not only on Asgard, but on Midgard too. Valkyries descended on villages, not to bless, but to conscript. Warriors were taken from hearths. Shields pressed into hands that once held plows. Farmers whispered in fear, "This is not war for us. This is war for prophecy." Some bent their knees to Odin. Others bent their vows to Tyr. The divide grew sharper. In halls of men, skalds sang new verses. They told of the All-Father's armies, bright as flame. But louder still, they sang of the one-handed wanderer, who walked among mortals, judging fair, giving no bribes, asking no crown. His legend spread with every mile. What had been outlaw became anthem. Odin heard the songs through his ravens. His jaw tightened, his one eye burned storm-dark. He walks among them. Odin muttered. He gathers hearts with silence, crowns with whispers. I will not let exile turn to kingdom. And so he sharpened his decree. Any mortal caught swearing Tyr's vow would be punished as enemy. Any clan that carved his rune would lose Asgard's protection. The crown would rule with fear if it could not rule with faith. But mortals still swore. They swore by Tyr in darkness, in fields, in ships. They swore with voices trembling, yet unbroken, for a vow lives stronger when threatened. Loki, of course, laughed sharper than ever. Oh, exquisite! The All-Father builds armies with fear, the Wanderer builds legends with whispers, and the wolf builds jaws with prophecy. Tell me, when fate bites, whose bite will break deeper? The silence after was heavier than steel. On the plain, Fenrir roared, Gleipnir shrieked, sparks flying like broken suns. The ground split wide, mountains shuddered, stars quaked. Yes, Tyr, even now, he fears you. Even now, he casts mortals into fire for your name. When I rise, crown and exile will both burn, and your vow will be ash between my teeth. The chain screamed brittle, fraying. For one dreadful moment, a link split, glowing, cracking, but still Gleipnir held. Barely. That night, Tyr walked farther than ever into exile, his sword beneath his hand, his cloak wrapped tight. His voice was quiet, steady, carved into the night. Then let him burn my name. Let him punish my vow. I will still keep it, even if truth leaves me the last oath unbroken in all the 9 worlds. The stars flickered, cold witnesses. The wolf laughed, and Odin's silence sharpened into fire. There are weapons forged for war, and there are weapons forged for fear. Odin now wielded both. In the forges of Nidavellir, the dwarves had shaped spears tipped with runes older than crowns, shields laced with spells that glowed like stars. Odin named them not after victory, but after endings: Wolfbane, Fatebreaker, Silencer of Odes. When the first spear was hurled in testing, it split a mountain in 2. When the first shield was raised, it turned aside, lightning itself. The gods watched, awe and dread in equal measure. These, Odin said, voice iron, are not for mortals. They are for prophecy. They are for the wolf. But the whispers that followed were not of Fenrir. They were of Tyr. For mortals had begun to speak louder. In villages, they swore vows not in secret, but in firelight. In cities, they carved Tyr's rune on gates and shields. Even warriors pressed into Odin's armies whispered his name before battle, hiding it under their breath. The vow outlawed had become unbreakable. Odin heard this too. His one eye darkened. If mortals crown him still, then I will show them ruin. Let them see what defiance costs. And so he sent fire down on those who swore too boldly. Villages burned, shrines shattered. The Bifrost itself carried punishment swifter than storm. But fire does not kill faith. It feeds it. For every shrine destroyed, 2 rose hidden. For every vow broken by fear, 10 were whispered stronger. Loki's grin spread wide. Oh, magnificent! The Allfather strikes mortals, mortals crown Tyr, and the wolf sharpens his jaws. Tell me which will fall first. Throne, vow, or chain, the silence after was sharper than spears. On the plain, Fenrir roared. Gleipnir screamed, sparks showering like shattered suns. The soil split wide. Stars trembled as though ready to fall. Yes, Tyr, even now, he forges weapons to kill fate itself. Even now, he burns mortals for whispering you. When I rise, I will devour his weapons, his crown, his throne, and you most of all. The chain shrieked, thin as glass, cracking. For one terrible heartbeat, prophecy's jaws yawned wide. Then Gleipnir held, but its song was faint, fading. That night, Tyr stood at the edge of exile, beyond the glow of gods and men, his sword beneath his hand, his cloak wrapped tight. His voice was quiet, steady, carved into the endless dark. Then let him forge spears. Let him burn shrines. Let him strike mortals for my name. I will still keep the vow, even if truth leaves me no fire but my own blood. The stars flickered, cold witnesses. The wolf laughed, and Odin's silence deepened into storm. There comes a moment when preparation ends, and only the march remains. Odin had reached that moment. The armies of Asgard gathered beneath the golden walls, shields flashing like rivers of fire. Valkyries circled above, their wings casting shadows like storm clouds. Thor stood at the front, Mjolnir humming with thunder. Heimdall raised his horn, though it had not yet sounded Ragnarok. Odin's voice rolled like thunder. The wolf strains. The chain weakens. We will not wait. We march now. We strike prophecy before prophecy strikes us. The roar of gods and warriors shook the plain. Yet beneath the roar, a silence lingered, the silence of Tyr's absence. For while Asgard's armies marched, mortals in Midgard whispered defiance. Villages hidden in the forest raised shields painted with Tyr's rune. Farmers swore oaths in firelight, refusing Odin's decree. Skald sang verses outlawed, their voices louder for the danger. And in the darkest halls, whispers spread. The wanderer walks with us. The judge watches. The vow still lives. Exile was no longer silence. It was resistance. Odin's ravens carried these whispers back. His one eye darkened, stormfire burning. Then let mortals burn with prophecy. If they crown Tyr, they will fall with him. And so the decree sharpened. Odin's armies would not only march against prophecy, but against any mortal who dared raise Tyr's name. The crown had chosen war not only with fate, but with its own people. Loki's laughter slithered through the halls. Oh, exquisite! The All-Father wages war on mortals, on prophecy, on whispers. He spreads his spears so thin they pierce nothing. Tell me, brothers and sisters, what throne still stands when it fights everyone at once? No one answered. The silence itself was poison. On the plain, Fenrir howled, his body straining, jaws wide. Gleipnir screamed, sparks exploding like broken suns. The soil split wide. Stars flickered. Roots trembled as if Yggdrasil itself feared. Yes, Tyr, even now, he marches armies against fate itself. Even now, he burns mortal for your name. When I rise, I will devour crown, throne, and exile alike. You will taste ruin first, and you will know it was your vow that fed me. The chain shrieked, brittle, splitting. For one dreadful moment, a link snapped, glowing, breaking, ringing like doom across the 9 worlds. Yet Gleipnir still clung, weaker than breath, thinner than hope. That night, Tyr stood at the edge of shadow, his sword beneath his hand, his cloak wrapped tight. His voice was quiet, steady, carved into the endless night. Then let him march. Let him burn. Let him war against prophecy itself. I will still keep the vow. Even if truth is the last thing standing when all else is devoured. The stars flickered, cold witnesses. The wolf laughed, and Odin's silence hardened into final war. Prophecy does not wait forever. It breathes, it sharpens, it breaks. And on that day, the song of Gleipnir ended. The plain shook like thunder. Fenrir's body swelled, his muscles straining, his jaws snapping. The chains shrieked, sparks raining like shattered suns. And then, with a sound that split the 9 worlds, Gleipnir snapped. The wolf was free. His roar tore the sky. Stars flickered, mountains split, seas boiled. The air stank of iron and doom. And Asgard trembled. Odin's army surged forward, shields locked, spears raised, Valkyries diving from the storm. Thor's hammer roared, lightning tearing the sky. Heimdall's horn rang, its sound carrying across all realms. Ragnarok had come. And Tyr? Tyr walked from exile to battlefield, his cloak heavy, his sword beneath his one hand. His voice was steady, carved into the storm. I lost my hand for this vow. I will lose my life for it too. The mortals' whispers rose like fire. The gods turned their eyes. Even Fenrir still for a heartbeat, his jaws wide, as if mocking the courage that dared stand before him. The wolf lunged. Tyr met him. His sword cut true, his stance unbending, his vow unbroken. But prophecy is not a thing to be slain. Fenrir's jaws closed, swallowing sword and god together. Yet in that devouring, Tyr's truth blazed brighter than any crown. For he did not flinch. He did not falter. He did not betray. He kept the vow, even as the jaws closed. Odin watched, stormfire in his eye. He saw what prophecy had taken. And he knew it was not just a hand, not just a god, but the weight of law itself that had been swallowed. Still he raised Gungnir. Still he hurled it. Still the war of Ragnarok raged. But Tyr's silence remained. A silence sharper than any blade, steadier than any throne. Among mortals, his name did not die. They whispered it louder. They carved it deeper. They taught their children, a vow is a vow, even if it costs you everything. And so, though Fenrir's jaws closed, Tyr's truth opened. Not in halls of Asgard, not in thrones of gold, but in the hearts of those who swore. The wolf laughed, devouring. Odin roared, striking. Thor thundered, shattering. Ragnarok burned. But somewhere beyond the storm, beyond the fire, beyond even prophecy's jaws, Tyr's voice lingered. Quiet, steady, unbending. I will still keep the vow. Thus ended the saga of Tyr, Hand of Fate, the god who lost his hand to bind the wolf, his seat to exile, his life to prophecy, but never his vow. And I know that vows outlive crowns.